logistics for today's meeting.
This meeting
First,
is
we are
being
recording and live
recorded.
streaming this meeting over today and tomorrow. In addition to joining via Zoom, you can view this meeting via live stream at the CalSpan website at cal-span.org, where the recording will also be available. Or the direct link is also available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC/meetings. We have developed a social media toolkit in case you would like to share your engagement and outcomes via social media, and are happy to share with participants at your request if you email the Tribal Advisor main email at info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov. You can also submit general comments to or request a meeting at that email. If you are interested in subscribing to receive updates, you can also do so at the California Truth and Healing landing page at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. You can get updates for events by following us on Facebook at the Office of Tribal Advisor Facebook page. And if you'd like to schedule a tribal consultation, you can do so at the Council landing page. Again, that's tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. The participation information that was provided to you will work for the entire 2-day meeting. So you can come and go as you please with the same Zoom link or watch via CalSpan. Additional details, including agendas and background information, are available at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC, with helpful documents at the Resources tab and meeting materials at tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC. If you need technical assistance during the meeting, please contact the Office of the Tribal Advisor email at info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov. If you've not already done so and you plan on engaging in this meeting, please update your name to say your name and your tribe or your organization that you're representing or that you come from. You've all been muted and your cameras have been disabled. And we ask that you remain muted as we go through these panels. There will be public comment and discussion throughout the panels, and that will probably happen pretty frequently, but we will again have public comment at the end of today's meeting as well. Once we get into the discussion or public comment portion of today's meetings, you can ask questions by using the raise hand function. If you are using the Zoom app, you should be able to do that using the app controls, but you can also use Alt-Y in Windows or Option-Y on Mac to raise or lower your hand. If you have difficulty, you can also directly message me that you have a comment and we'll call on you or read it into the record. If you've called in, we'll go through raised hands first, but you can then unmute your line using *6 to give those comments and questions. Or you can email written comments to info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov. Again, thank you for joining us today, and I'll now very briefly give you an overview of the Truth and Healing Council and the layout of this initial meeting before we get into today's official business. The California Truth and Healing Council was created under Executive Order N-1519, and it bears witness to, records, examines existing documentation of, and receives California Native American narratives regarding the historical relationship between the state of California and California Native Americans in order to clarify the historical record of such relationship in the spirit of truth and healing. The Council works in consultation with California Native American tribes to shape the overarching focus and develop the work of the Council, and will endeavor to accurately represent the diversity of experiences of California Native Americans within the state of California. Though this is a challenging time, given that conditions are in flux, we felt it was important to keep moving and seat the Council so that we can begin this work as the clock is ticking. The goal of this meeting is, over the course of today and tomorrow, to give California Native Americans, tribes, and the general public a better understanding of the California Truth and Healing Council and how all Californians can get involved. For the Council to be effective in its work, the entire community needs to come together to address deep historical wounds and move forward together through a collective, supportive healing process. Meetings of the Council will take place on a quarterly basis over 2 days. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, Council meetings will take place virtually and live streamed until conditions allow for in-person participation. These meetings will be recorded and made available on the Tribal Advisors website. Once COVID-19 conditions alleviate, the Council will rotate its meeting locations throughout the 4 geographical areas in the state. This meeting will look a bit different from regular Council meetings, as we have some introductory items to get through. I'll go over what a typical meeting will look like later this morning. For this meeting, day one, which would usually be dedicated to a talking circle for the community, will be dedicated to kickoff logistics, introductions, and walking the council and public participants through the council materials. The community talking circle will likely begin in the council's next meeting, as we have decided to hold on until the council determines how it would like to select a culturally informed wellness practitioner to moderate that day, given the potential for difficult topics to come up. And we want to make sure that that resource is available for anyone who is sharing those difficult topics or processing those topics. In day two, the council will hear from a number of experts and leaders in truth and reconciliation mechanisms, including Ambassador Keith Harper, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Human Rights Council under President Obama, Jody Archambault, Special Assistant to the President for Native American Affairs for the White House Domestic Policy Council under President Obama, the Honorable Angela Riley, who served as co-chair for the United Nations Indigenous Peoples Partnership Policy Board, Chief Willie Littlechild, a former commissioner from the Canada Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and leaders from the Maine Wabanaki Truth and Reconciliation Commission. What is so special about tomorrow's presenters is that they're all Native professionals engaged in the work of restorative justice for Native peoples. We'll have a unique opportunity to hear how they have grappled with these issues, lessons they have learned along the way, and advice they have for this council as it embarks on the work of restoring nations across California. Now, before we begin, I would like to remind participants that all of our council members, our presenters, and I as the tribal advisor are also members of the victim population in need of collective healing. So I ask that you engage with the council and each other with respect and with your whole heart in a healing space. Many of those doing this work are navigating systems that were not built for them to make change that was never contemplated. This in itself takes an enormous amount of patience and emotional integrity, and we're all doing our best to make strides in these spaces. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll begin with the agenda for today's meeting, and we'll start with a roll call of our newly appointed council members by region and in alphabetical order. So we'll start with the Central Region. Chairman Kenneth Kahn.
Present.
Kusla Kessler-Mata.
Present.
Chairman Mark Maccaro.
No, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Alexis Manzano. I believe she was having some technical issues, so we'll see when she joined us. For the Eastern District, Anthony Burris.
Present.
Chairman Neil Perrin.
I'm here.
Chief Kayleen Sisk.
Present.
And Chairman Anthony Roberts.
Present.
For the Northern District, Chairman Isaac Bojorquez.
Present.
Councilmember Joan Harper.
Present.
Vice Chairman Frankie Myers.
Itoy.
And Councilmember Joseph Giovanetti.
Present.
For the Southern Region, Chairwoman Angela Elliot Santos.
Present.
Vice Chairwoman Tishmal Turner. Great. And then we have our alternate for that region is Robert Phelps.
Present.
But we do have a vacancy on that region, and we can talk about that a bit later for the non-federally recognized tribal seat. So it looks like everybody who has been appointed is present. We have a quorum, and we will get started with our next agenda item, which is the traditional opening, and we'll have that from Chief Kayleen Sisk. Thank you, Chief Sisk. So we will now go into our next agenda item, which is the introduction of the members of the council. For clarification, we appointed the 12 members of the council as we had contemplated, but we also, based on feedback from our listening sessions, appointed alternate voting members as well. So in the event that the appointed voting members are not available, those members will step up and assume the voting role. But for all other intents and purposes, they're full members of the council. And they're able to engage as full members of the council, except not voting on voting items. And so what we'll do is we'll go through each of those members, and we'll do it in the same order as we did the roll call, and each of them will have an opportunity to introduce themselves to all of you and tell us a little bit about why they came to the council, a little bit about their backgrounds, and what motivates them to do this work. So we will start with Chairman Khan.
Haku Matuka Kenneth Khan, the chairman of the Seninez Band of Chumash Indians. Good morning to all the tribal leaders. It's good to see some familiar faces and familiar voices. Christina, and to you and to the governor's office, thank you. Certainly is an honor to join this commission. I have been chairman for about 3.5 years now for the Chumash, and on council for about 17 years. And so my passion has been in tribal governance and in educating our community about our tribal ways. When I was young, the surrounding communities and jurisdictions really didn't have they didn't have a whole lot of information on what it's like to be a tribe and what is tribal sovereignty. And so my passion has been to share about our community, about our customs, our traditions, and to work with surrounding communities, surrounding tribes. And so being a part of this council, it means a lot because I feel like it's just an extension of my life's work and the work of the tribal leaders that inspire me and tribal elders that inspire me. So it's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to learning from you all, from reaching out to our tribes throughout the state of California, and to do the best that I can to help educate and empower for tribal social justice. Thank you. Kakinash.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll now go to Kusla Kessler-Mata.
Hi, thank you, Christina, and thank you for organizing this event. Hi, everyone. I'm Kusla Kessler-Mata. I am here representing the Yaktitu Titu Chumash group. We are a tribe. My family's based out of Avila Beach area. We're descendants of Rosario Cooper. This is on my father's side of the family. On my paternal side, my grandmother's side is actually Yokut. So we are descendants from Martina Estrada's line, Christina Estrada being my grandmother. I feel very honored to be on this committee and joining this group. I'm an academic, right? So I do a lot of research, but most of my research has to do with actually California Indian history and kind of the impact, the lasting impact of that history on tribal communities and especially unrecognized tribes. So for me, it's a real pleasure, right? But also a real challenge to kind of bring some of the things that I know are obstacles to fruition to be addressed, right? So I know that this is going to be tough work, and I appreciate that we have a really supportive group of leaders that are being brought together to do this work. I also want to recognize that a lot of my family lineage is from Northern California, right? So I'm actually from Arcata. That's where I was born. My father married into a Yurok family. So we have Yurok relations, also Karuk relations, right? That's kind of culturally where I feel most affiliated in some ways. So it's interesting coming to this as what I think of as a real like California Indian, like north to south, right? So I feel like my identity is captured by California Indian, that term. So I look forward to working with everyone. And my personal kind of like, if I had to say personal agenda items that I bring to the table, I'm really interested in seeing us move forward on co-management issues with the state. I'm really interested in seeing us kind of work on land back, right? How can we address some of the outcomes of the unratified treaties, right? And the impact they've had on tribes, and of course to address some of the ongoing recognition issues that unrecognized tribes are facing. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was just wonderful. And these two introductions have also brought up, I just wanted to give people clarity about the appointments process, and that all of the selections that we made and the governor reviewed and approved and supported and is very happy with were made because of what each of these council members brings to the table. So the whole picture of these folks as a whole. So we do have a number of academics who are here who have dedicated their work to furthering the issues of California Native peoples as California Native people. We also have a number of tribal leaders. We have a number of tribal leaders who are also organizers and activists. And so we have tried to create regional diversity, diversity of experience, diversity of viewpoints, diversity of recognition status, diversity of gender, diversity of age. We've tried to have to capture everything in a 12-member, well now 16-member council. And so again, you'll hear in these introductions that a lot of our members have that range of diversity built into themselves as well. So we'll now move to Chairman Maccaro. Chairman, you're on mute.
Opa. Me yam. Palova mo echnai. Lova kapiva outwana. Diva opomesh. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Maccaro, and it's good to be here with all of you. I'd like to say congratulations to all of you for being appointed to this council. Look forward to serving with all of you. Christina, thanks for the background on those appointments. I see this as a very important undertaking and endeavor for Indian country in California. Just a quick background, I guess you want to hear about as far as being an elected official here for my tribe. I was first elected in 1992 to our tribal council, reelected in 94 as a council member, and then our tribal chair resigned in 95 to take a job somewhere, and I became chairman in 1995. I've been chairman at Pechanga since then, consecutive years. So that's kind of a long time, 25 years, I think. We just had elections, and it was kind of a tough distanced election physically, but we were able to conduct it safely, and all the incumbents were able to get reelected. But there were 5 challengers amongst our group. So anyway, enough about that. Before I was in elected office, I was able to work several places in Indian country, in education for the Soboba tribe, and museum management for the Rincon tribe. I think that together with a lot of, over the years, different boards that I've been able to be part of, the Harvard project that they do, highlighting projects that are worthy of replicating in Indian country, that provide services to people, for instance. The NARF board, currently the NIGA board, I've been able to participate and see a good deal breadth of experience, challenges, successes and failures, all of which are things that I think are part of what are in our basket to be able to carry forward, to do things better and survive into the next generation, for sure. I feel fortunate that I was able to have able to complete a bachelor's degree at UC Santa Barbara in the late 1980s. I was concerned, Christina, that you mentioned that you were trying to go for a diversity of just diversity of age and other things on this board. And I'm hoping there's a couple of you that are a year or two older than me. So maybe we'll find that out later. As far as my thoughts about restorative justice, I do want to say I find it interesting that the concept comes out of, well, to what to me seems like the penal system, strictly speaking. Now, maybe I'm misinformed on that. I'm not a practitioner in this field of restorative justice, but I will say that what I find an interesting juxtaposition at this point in time is that my father he worked in the penal system. He was a prison guard for the California Youth Authority, which is now defunct. I think it's been folded. I forget what they call it, corrections. And but he was killed in the line of duty in 1988, and chasing down a prisoner who was trying to escape. So the whole dynamic of restorative justice is really something that strikes a personal chord with me. But certainly in the history of this state with tribes is something that I think we really need to bring out into the open. So I think one of the things I'm looking forward to with this is the challenge of not only doing the work that we need to do to do all the things that restorative justice can potentially do for our people collectively, but it's not going to have the value that it potentially could have if the rest of California doesn't know that we're doing this. And so I'm looking forward to that challenge, because I think that's an important part of the work we're going to do. So that's what I think one of my ideas of success looks like, is if we can let everybody else know what is happening, that this is happening, and they too can be part of this and should be as Californians, then I think we will be successful. So I was kind of working off your bullets, Christina. The last one references what are we hoping the council can achieve as we do our work over the next few years. I have questions about that, but I'll save that for a little bit later. But the phrase "next few years" is the part that caught my eye. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If Council Member Alexis Manzano has joined us, we'd love to hear from you. But I understand that there were some issues, but I don't see her. So we will come back to her if she ever joins. From Eastern District, or Region, sorry. Anthony Burris.
Hi, I'm gonna take a drink of water really quick. So I'll be talking for a minute.
Also, council members, feel free to eat and drink on this Zoom. I know that Zoom etiquette is kind of iffy, but feel free to keep yourself alive.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Anthony Burris. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Sacramento and have lived my life in the greater Sacramento area. I am enrolled with the Ione Band of Miwok Indians. My family is from the 40 acres outside of Ione that, although not actually trust land, a lot of people call it the Ione Res. And this is where I spent much of my childhood. Both of my grandparents were very active in the Miwok community, with my grandfather functioning as a leader and my grandmother as a culture bearer. And the families I come from are the Burris, Blue, Ray, and Walupi families. So if you know Miwok people around here, you might know some of those names. And these families are in several of the Miwok tribes in the greater Sacramento area. I'm currently enrolled as a PhD student in Native American Studies at UC Davis. I hold a master's degree in Native American Studies from UC Davis and a bachelor's degree in Native American Studies from UC Berkeley. So I've been pretty consistent. And then my research interest is with Native American Grace Protection and Repatriation Act, looking at tribal implementation of NAGPRA in the Sacramento region. I was chairperson of my tribe's cultural committee from 2012 to 2015, and I served as secretary of that same committee from 2015 to 2018. And then I was also the tribe's NAGPRA representative during that time. I successfully applied for 2 of those large National Park Service NAGPRA consultation grants, and I used those funds to spearhead intertribal efforts to consult with state parks about ancestors and their possession. And then I also participated in intertribal efforts related to cultural site protection and preservation during that period. What inspired me to serve on this council? Well, I was inspired to serve on this council by my life experiences, being raised in 2 societies where one society does not recognize or acknowledge the other. What little acknowledgement there was often involved harmful stereotypes, and absent was any accurate understanding of history. Another big inspiration for this was my recent work with state parks as a Mellon Public Scholar. We've been examining Sutter's Fort and Marshall Gold Discovery State Park for needed changes that reflect Native American community viewpoints at those parks. And I kind of see that work as being, parallel and related to the mission of this council. Really quick, I do want to thank that Tribal Affairs team over there and Brittany Arona for creating that opportunity with the Mellon Public Scholars Fellowships. That's part of what really catapulted me here. And then my thoughts on restorative justice. I think this has been touched on already, but land back. We see that hashtag all the time. There's the big movement towards that. So I kind of anticipate that reflects what the community will want. I think the state should be supportive of tribal efforts to acquire land. I think we've seen some opposition to this in the past. I'd like to see that change through policy or whatnot. I think there should be more funding opportunities for education, vocational training, and entrepreneurship for tribal members. Tribes need better access to our sites that are on parks lands, and we need better access for gathering and other cultural activities. There should be wide acknowledgement of history. I think most people in the state aren't aware of the role the state played in genocidal policies, including millions of dollars spent funding efforts to eradicate Native American communities. Sorry, I'm getting into the nitty gritty here, but I think that's why we're here. I also think the public is unaware of Indian slavery that was enshrined into state law in 1850 by the first California state legislature. And I think there should be some restorative justice measures related to the unratified treaties signed by California tribes. And while treaty making is a federal matter, California played a major role in ensuring those treaties were not ratified. And obviously there are ongoing consequences for this that have lasted until this moment, including the fact that we have many tribes that do not have federal recognition, and they should have that. And that's what I have.
That was wonderful. Thank you. We will now move to Chairman Perrin.
Good morning. My name is Chairman Neil Perron. I am from the Tule River people. We live here on the Tule River Indian Reservation, and I'm honored to sit on this body with all of these esteemed leaders. So I guess I'm the layman here, still going to school when time allows and the job allows. And those of you that sit in these positions know that free time is few and far between. I kind of got involved in politics here on our reservation through my mother and my aunts, and my grandmother was involved, and it just kind of happened. I've been the chairman here since 2000. I got elected to tribal council in 2002, became the chairman in 2003. I lost my mother in 2010. I took some time off there, 2009, 2010. I took some time off, went back to our gaming commission, was reappointed there by our council, and then family encouraged me to run for council again in 2012. I did so, and I've been the chairman ever since. My father, he's Punkalachi Yoka from the Deer Creek area here in Tulare County. My mother is Yalumni and Sapaiute and Wenatchee and Twinomni and a little bit of everything. Our reservation is kind of a conglomerate of all of the Yokuts tribes, and if you believe the books, our territory extended from the Tejon Pass all the way up into slightly above Stockton, and then mountain range to mountain range. We've had dealings with the Chumash people. Chairman, it's good to have you on the call. And we still have the traditional trails back to Paiute territory through the Sierra Nevada mountains here on the reservation. So yeah, our people was one of the signees of those 1850s treaties that was never ratified. That was the Paint Creek Treaty with one of our bands here on the reservation. So I think that this has been long coming, and I'm glad the governor is doing this and giving us the opportunity to express our concerns. The Tule River Reservation is a little over 84.2 square miles. But most of that is red clay and granite, and our elevation goes from the entrance at 900 feet, caps out a little below 7,600 feet. So there's not a lot of room for housing and other types of development. So I'm glad some of the other leaders brought up land. We seem to run into problems every time we try to put something into trust, and the tribe always seems to have to give up a lot and a lot of concessions to get some ink on a paper to allow us to do things with our land that we should have that sovereign right to do so anyway. But I am honored to be here. I'm honored to participate, and thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think what's really special about your participation here is I think that a lot of Californians are not aware of the fact that parks here were not always just parks, and that people actually live there. And I really love that you can bring that element of a lot of the Yokut tribes living up and down Yosemite and having been removed from there. And now also a lot of them are staffing those parks now. And so I think bringing that element, bringing that to light and having people realize the extent of what has happened here, I think in places where I think that there's an assumption that these places have been always for access of non-native people and that it's their lands and their traditional California lands. And I think that having that element here is really, and I think that's a lot of pretty much all of you, honestly, have that perspective that will be really important for the non-native folks to hear in these discussions. So really appreciate it. We'll now move to Chief Sisk, who has another area that people like to go to in the Shasta area. So we'd love to hear your introduction and thoughts.
All right, thank you very much. I am pleased to be on this council, and I have high hopes that we can really put our minds together and make a real change, a real difference, take action to do some things. You know, I'm born and raised in my home country. I live in my home country now. I also went to school at CSU Chico, taught school for a number of years. Then I worked for the university recruiting Indian students to go to college. And I also worked at a high desert state prison just recently for about 6 years. And so I have a wide variety of perspectives of what is happening to our Native people, people of color. And there are many, many things that I think, you know, our communities are addressing and trying to survive with that can be fixed by the governor's office. And I think that, you know, this council, and if he's true to his word about the healing and telling the truth is only one small part of this whole healing cycle. It's taking action and doing things so that tribal ways can continue to exist and to be the kinds of things that they need them to be. And land back is not just about the housing, but it's about housing that promotes tribalism, not neighborhoods, not trailer parks, not markets. They have to support tribalism. Otherwise, we won't have no tribes here anymore. We'll just have people who are enrolled in a tribe that have no other connections to the wildlife, to the plants, to the salmon, you know, and we have a lot of responsibility about that. And we've come from a historic trauma in the building of this state to this point in time. And my concern is that, you know, we believe that whatever happens to the salmon happens to us. When they built the dam on Shasta, they blocked the salmon from going home. They also blocked us from going home. We lost all of our land and all of the river to the Shasta Dam. We visit there. We're allowed to go and do our ceremonies there with the Forest Service finally, but that was because of an act of Congress for Native American Indian rights, religious rights. But now, since they did this whole thing about recognized tribes, we lost those rights somehow. And so everything that we do is pretty much against the law. Dancing on our river and our traditional ceremonial sites is actually against the law. Because they have us in this terminology of unrecognized Indians. And they seem to have forgotten all of the contracts and all of the treaties and all of the California claims case issues that certified us as being Indians from a tribe here before California became a state. So there's a lot of injustice in the word term, unrecognized tribes. That healing has to come about. And that correction for California, there should be no California Indian who fits into an unrecognized category. I mean, it's like us, me and my sisters, the elders from that time, we all have certified numbers from the BIA certifying how much blood degree and how much Indian we are. And now they turn around and say, oh, you're unrecognized. We're still the people from the McCloud River. We're still the people fighting for the salmon. We're still the people singing to the waters and singing to the springs. Yet we did file a complaint to the UN for our religious rights. Apparently, we don't have any religious rights guaranteed by Constitution or the American Indian Religious Freedoms Act unless we belong to a church. If we belong to a church, then the amendment for religious freedom applies. But we don't. So I'm interested in this commission or this council, and I'm hoping that some of you that are more studied and doing things and have legal access might have other ideas about California, because I think California should be treated separate and different than any other state, because we shouldn't have unrecognized tribes here, and we shouldn't put up with that category of what has happened here. And we shouldn't also have disenrolled Indian tribal members. We need to address those kinds of things. We need to address the losses of our lands and waters. We need to address the water rights that we so desperately need. And we need to make sure that our communities can survive into the future. Like, what are we going to be looking like in 25 years and 50 years? What will our kids be looking like? Will they still be singing and dancing and wanting to be like our ancestors were, our elders were? Because that part of it, it's fading, and it's trying to compete with modern communication, modern electronics, and we're losing the heart of things. You know, and when the casino tribes started up, we all supported that. And we thought, yes, that's probably going to help. But now I see that it isn't a matter of how much money we have that heals our hearts. It's how much culture and tradition and religion we have that really anchors us. That anchors us to our lands and our ways and our songs and our mountains, and understanding how we fit in there. And so that's kind of what I want to work on with this committee, you know, for the salmon and for the people. Because if the salmon can survive, then we're sure to be able to survive too. So I hope that's enough.
Thank you, Chief Sisk. That was wonderful. And I think it also brings up some of the challenges that this council is really going to have to work through of, you know, a lot of the things we do as tribal nations, as tribal people, is in the context of colonialism, right? And so even the things that we do to each other is in the context of this colonial Western framework that I think this council is challenged to push back on, question. And then also you brought up some points about the federal government and how is, you know, the state and the state participants of this council, how are we both going to undo some of the things that are causing those Western colonial pressures on tribal governments and tribal peoples, but also how are we going to be allies in this new administration in furthering the needs of California Native peoples up and down the state. And so I think those are all questions for this council to think about. So really appreciate your thoughts.
Yeah, could I say just one more thing about that is
Sure.
like, I have high hopes for the state of California beginning to do and to start becoming more responsible for what has happened to the California tribes and the taking of our land, and because they're the ones who prospered. You know, it's the state of California that's the 5th largest economy in the world. However, they put us into poverty. We didn't know how to be into poverty, but we're in poverty now. And we're struggling with that because we have these other thoughts about how life is and how generous we are, or how responsible to and for our neighbors and people and villages and children that we are. So I'm hoping that this government will step up and establish one, state-created reservation systems for all of the tribes to be able to have some land, and stop waiting for the federal government to do something that they're never going to do. They've never done anything. And so, the state of California doesn't become the 5th largest economy because it's waiting for the federal government to help it. So now is the time. I think this is a bold move on Newsom's part to enact a committee like this, because he must know that people like me are going to be on it, or or saying them things about it. So I have high hopes, and I'm glad that you're in there, Christina, and doing the job that you've been doing over the years. And so this is going to be very interesting to me.
Thank you. If it's interesting, then we've at least got that. And the governor is very committed to taking bold action, and he's not shying away from issues like this. I think if the state is really going to reflect what we are saying are our values collectively, we can't shy away from those kind of issues. So really appreciate your comments and your feedback. And I think that's something that this council will have to consider as it moves forward. So we'll now have Chairman Roberts.
Hello, thank you, Christina. Hekumin Bosai, Nanoyer Anthony, Chuyo Chadihi. Good morning, everybody. My name is Anthony. I'm from Yochadihi, chairman here for the Wintun Nation. I've been on tribal council since 2000. The first 2 terms, we have 3-year terms. First 2 terms, I was a member at large. In 2006, I took over the treasurer position for the board. Held that position for 3 terms, which it was 9 years, and then this last go around, when elections came, our prior chairman stepped down to focus on culture, education, language, and through the nomination process, I was nominated and took over as chairman. And so we have elections coming up again in January. It's been 3 years. I can't believe it's gone and come and gone that quick, but it's been a fantastic ride. And so I'm just excited to be a part of this, this council. I look forward to working with the esteemed leaders, educators, and all the folks who are, working on this endeavor. I think there's been a common theme with some of the comments going around. And when you talk about reform and justice reform, I think there's a whole gamut under that umbrella. And a lot of that has been touched on today. I think some of the, excitement for me and some of the reason why I'm so passionate and honored and thankful to be part of this council. As we said, we've struggled for so many years trying to get what's rightfully ours back. And speaking of land, water, and there's so many things, like I said, across the under that umbrella. And so for me, I'm just excited, like I said, to be a part of this. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to help tribal nations across this state, prosper, and across the country for that matter. It's exciting. I think Chief Sisk, hit the nail on the head. It's been a long time coming, and truly grateful for the governor and your team, the staff, for putting something like this together. Like I said, it's extremely exciting, and I think that some great things can be done. There are a lot of questions that need to be answered. I have some myself, but I think going forward, we can definitely make some change, for Native peoples in this state. And I'm extremely excited to be a part of that. I just think about, like I said, some of the comments, you talk about elders, and we're an extremely small tribe. I believe there's, with the children that are being born, I believe we're up to about 80, low 70s, 80 now. And so for us, it's, we lose our elders. We're growing, but unfortunately we're losing our elders. And so for us to be able to hold on to what they've taught us, to be stewards of our land and nurture the place that you live and to hold on to your culture and your religion. I think it's our responsibility now. That has to be passed down to us and somebody has to carry that on. And in my eyes, I have a little ways to go to become an elder. But I do feel, my time on the council and what I've been able to, accomplish and bring to the tribe, puts me in a position to help this organization and this council out. And so, as I said a number of times, I'm extremely honored and excited to see what we can do as a team. And I just look forward to working with everybody. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chairman. And you brought up an excellent point. For those of you who have survived elections, congratulations. For those of you who are waiting to go through elections, that whatever the outcome is should have no bearing on your serving on this council. We designed appointments to be reflective of community support and tribal support. So as long as everybody still likes you and wants you on this council, you should be able to stick around for the long haul. So really appreciate your joining us and really appreciate your sentiments. We'll now move to the northern region and we'll start with Chairman Boyorquez.
Mrs. Charwe Incatekara, Isaac Boyorquez. I'm chairman for the Kakuntaruk Band of Ohlone Costanoan Indians of the Big Sur Rancheria. I know that's kind of a mouthful, but I'm honored to be able to serve my people and be a voice for my ancestors. And I'm honored to be amongst all the tribal leaders that are here today. I consider myself a concrete Indian. I was born and raised in Woodland in Yolo County in Butland Territory. I currently live in Sacramento. And so I've had to relearn a lot of my things, our traditional cultural ways. And so many of tribal leaders, spiritual leaders throughout the state of California have been so instrumental to me in guiding me and just giving me so much. I've been blessed in so many different ways from across this state. And it's just an honor to be here, to be a member of this council. There is so much work ahead of us, and I'm excited to be a part of that. I've heard so many of the other leaders touch on, federal recognition, non-federally recognized tribe, land back. There's so many topics that are in front of us that are important to each of us. And I'm just honored again to be a part of the council. And it's through these types of collaborations, just as our ancestors did. We all used to come together at different times in our own communities for spiritual gatherings, for dances, for dinners, for all the different things that used to transpire. And it is humbling and heartwarming to see that we can come together collaboratively for the good of all Native people across California. I'm just truly honored to be a part of that. I look forward to the hard work ahead of us. I definitely want to say thank you to you, Christina, and to the governor for making this council and pushing this. As chief, I think it was Sis that said earlier, this bold move. It is a bold move to go in this direction. And again, honored to be amongst so many of these great leaders. I think I'm the new kid on the block, so I look forward to guidance and providing some input where I can and helping. And just a little bit about my young background. So I actually worked in law enforcement. I used to work for juvenile corrections in Yolo County before taking a position out with Yochadihi at the Cache Creek Casino. I worked for the gaming agency with Yochadihi and currently serve as the director for cultural resources for Yochadihi. So I'm definitely honored to be able to serve two governments and really appreciative again for the opportunities that have been put before me. And I know that Creator will continue to guide all of us so that we can do and make the tough choices that are right for Indian country here in California. Definitely appreciate it. And thank you so much. just want to keep it short and mindful of everyone's time. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll now go to Council Member Harper.
Open Tosh, my name is Joan Harper. I'm a council member and tribal treasurer for the Federated Indians of Great and Rancho and have served as the chairwoman of my tribe's Sacred Sites Protection Committee. I'm Pomo and Coast Miwok, and I grew up in Ukiah, California. My family has deep roots in the Jenner and Tole Valley areas of Sonoma and Marin County. I have a bachelor's degree in natural resources planning from Humboldt State, master's in city planning from San Diego State, and master's and PhD in American Studies from University of Hawaii. Many years ago, I worked as a college lecturer and counselor at Humboldt State University with Native students in the School of Natural Resources. I have experience in research and treatment of Native people in federal, state, and local archives, as well as in ethnographic reports, private collections, and in newspaper sources. I also have experience in working with Native people on land use, environmental, and transportation planning issues, as well as historic preservation in Southern California, Hawaii, and through my work with the National Indian Justice Center. I am inspired to serve on the council because I feel that it will be uniquely poised to help identify written records and cultural expressions and to gather testimony about the experiences of Native people of California. Most importantly, and unlike many other historical sources, I'm particularly inspired by the idea that the information will come from the perspectives of Native people and will become part of the permanent historical record of California and will serve as a lasting legacy from the Native people that will be the foundation for a continuing dialogue in which the voices of Native people, past, present, and future, will always be heard, respected, and never forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to Vice Chairman Frankie Myers.
Ayukwinak now, Frankie Myers, Mayor Chumachok Shregon, Kinnick Ok. Let me first say I've been vice chairman for 2 years now, and hearing some of the intro from my colleagues here on the council who have been in council for decades, my hat goes off to you. Good job, nicely done. This is it's a feat for sure, and all those. So I did want to just give you some praise for that. Good work on that one. I've been a community activist working on water protection and water rights for, I guess, about 20 years now. My dad, he fought in the 60s, 70s, and the 80s. My grandma worked in schools most of her life, teaching education. I'm really excited for this council. I'm excited because I think this is a huge step forward for California. I think it's a step in the right direction. I do have some specific things I want to work on in this council. I think most of what I have done in my career, I was a former tribal heritage preservation officer for the tribe, and now on the tribal council. Most of what I've done in my career is trying to educate adults in positions of leadership in agencies on what it means to be a tribal person and tribal perspective. I'm excited to try to change that narrative through our education system, starting as kids. I think for most folks, you don't necessarily learn a whole lot about tribes in California or in the nation until you get to college and take a class that's specific for that. And so I think that's a huge part of what I want to bring to the table is we need to change the historic narrative. We need to change what we are teaching all of our kids in California about tribes and about the relationship. And I think that's the truth piece. The more educated adults we have in this world, and then specifically in California about tribes, the better off we're going to be, regardless of what position they finally take. I think that's the truth part. We have to come out and tell the real honest truths of the of the mission systems, the unratified treaties, the negotiations that went on. I think that's extremely important for us as a society. I think it would make all of our jobs so much easier if we had a society that was simply educated on the basics of tribal relationships and tribal history in California. I'm so tired of starting history in California in 1849. I'm sick of talking about the introduction to non-natives in California. I'm so tired of doing that perspective. And I think we got to start educating our youth when they're young in the school systems as regular curriculum. Normalizing tribal history, I think, is extremely important. As that grows, the fight to kind of justify traditional ecological knowledge, I think, is extremely difficult now because that basis of normalizing our history isn't there. Christina, I also have to add a few other things. I really want to work on looking at what's some low-hanging fruit for the state to do. What are things that don't take acts of Congress? What can the governor do to help shift this? I know we are, actively working for land management within our agencies and our tribe. I think there's some low-hanging fruit to be had with the state parks, transferring management to tribal agencies or tribes that have the capacity to do so. I think that's something we can get done fairly quickly. I think there's a lot of good partners in the state agencies. I know up here in Northern we have good partners in the state, and I think a push to transfer those lands and start with transferring the management would be huge. Opening access immediately for all tribes to all state parks, regardless. I think that's low-hanging fruit, right? That's a stroke of the pen next week, and tribes have access to all of our tribal lands. But it also, in my mind, the healing part, the reconciliation part, means that we're seen at every level of government. I know with the new administration, presidential administration, there's some seats going to be opening up. I'm glad to hear you say that the governor is ready to take some bold steps. I think it's high time that California tribes are represented in the Senate, that our voices are heard there. And now I think could be the time, right? We have an ability for the governor to appoint some seats. And you want the healing part, that comes with recognition, and that comes with having the people in the places that have the say speaking from where they are and who they are. And so I want to throw that out there for everyone. If you haven't thought about that, this council, should start thinking about that as well. Like I said, we know that we're very happy to have an open seat in the Senate with Vice President-elect Harris. It's exciting. We need to be represented there. This is a good step forward, but some big, bold action that would be amazing for us. Obviously, I think land, healing our people is healing the land. We believe, as Chief Sis said, we're connected one-to-one with the salmon and with the world around us. And if we ever want to heal our communities, we have to heal our land. We have to heal our waters. And that means we need to be a part of that healing, a part of that restoration, a part of the boots on the ground work that happens. And we need to change a bit how the state views tribes and the ability to even give money to tribes, right? The simplest task of having a tribe sign a contract with the state can be really burdensome. Those are some of the low-hanging fruit I think we could work on. I think the bigger stuff of changing our education system and changing the history and retelling or telling the true story of tribes in California is a long-term vision that I hope we can get done. Welcome.
Thank you. And I think you've brought up a number of really good points for this council to consider. I know we have Santa Inez on, who's been a really huge proponent of changing local education systems and also for the model curriculum that was pushed statewide that has not yet been funded, but could get some support through actually this council from even private funders. because it's something just so instrumental to changing everything. I think you've hit some really great points about, I think every single person on this council has experienced the exhaustion and I'll just leave it at exhaustion of having to explain over and over and over that Native people are still here and that they look the way that we look, and that casinos are not just islands of buildings, but they represent something that's far bigger than that and have only been around in this form for a little bit. And that there's a whole jurisdictional thing that goes along with these. So I think you've brought up some wonderful points. I think too, you've brought up some great points about the federal administration. And this is not an endorsement or anything of the like, but if we did have a Native person in the cabinet, it would be very helpful to start thinking about what kind of things could be done in collaboration with the state, and that we could be talking to that person with, and likely get some support. I was throwing around in my head whether I should say this on a live stream or not, but also I think the vice president may have a couple of things that she needs to make good on from her past experience with California tribes. So it might be a good time to have those conversations as well. And we can, think about that in the context of this council. Again, really appreciate everything you're saying. I think too, UROC has actually been very successful in doing a lot of things and making a lot of mechanisms work and having a lot of successful partnerships at both the state and federal levels. And so really appreciate your bringing that to this council and also sharing how that has been, how you've been able to navigate that. I think, beyond some of the folks we have on this council, Yochadihi, Santa Ynez with the model curriculum, but, Pechanga with a lot of the state movement that they've had in cultural resource protection laws that have been passed. I think we've got a good council that has actually been effective in kind of changing things at both the federal and state levels. So really appreciate your insight and also the tools that all of you are bringing to this conversation. We'll now move to, and also don't feel like you need to rush through introductions. If we hit noon, we'll move our agenda item to the next agenda item till after the break. So feel free to keep giving us these great insights. So we'll now move to Council Member Joseph Giovanetti.
Delaha Hagi Asham, Joseph Giovanetti, Shahushi, Haunquit, Yantaket, Etchelet, Chesney Neshling. Good morning. I'm an enrolled member of the Tolowa-Dani Nation. We were formerly known as Smith River Rancheria. I suppose that's a colonial naming of all of our rancherias that got that name, Rancheria. I've been a tribal council member for 13 years. Well, it'll be 13 years in May. And I was elected in 2007. And my native side is from my mom. The Giovanetti name always throws people because they go, "What the heck is that?" It's Italian. My dad was from an immigrant family from central Italy that ended up near Ukiah around 1915. But anyway, my Tolowa side, I was raised by my Native American Tolowa grandparents in Eureka, which is about 75 miles south of our tribal traditional territory, but pretty close to home. And my my mother was a Whipple, and also our families include the Hostlers and the Bobs, the main surnames in our family, and also the Smileys. And acknowledging all my grandmas and grandpas and all my relations. And let's see, I was formerly enrolled with the Tolowa Nation, which was and is a petitioning tribe. I was enrolled there in '83. Of course, I was part of the legacy of the conquest and near annihilation of California tribes. When I was born, my parents got me enrolled. I got a California Indian roll number from one of the first from. It started 27, 28. But when I was born in '50, my grandparents got me enrolled right away. So I had all those different roll numbers leading up to the culmination of the California Indian land judgment case in '72. And let's see, so I grew up as an urban native, and which is quite an experience. We know, this is a gigantic population throughout California of urban people. My work career has been in education. I'm a retired academic. I worked in pretty much all my work was involved with equity programs for Native Americans. I started in a Title III ESEA federal Indian education program in 1974, producing Native American curriculum in 5 Northern California counties. And so we distributed that curriculum nationwide. And our people did a lot of training. And my work with Native American equity programs, I was the EOPS director at College of the Redwoods for 3.5 years. And I was just reflecting back, because of the indifference of many agencies, including community colleges and universities, our Native people are severely underserved in those settings. And wherever I've gone, I just realized that I like quadrupled or increased by a power of 5, not a power of 5, but 500% the funding of each one of those programs, simply because I was willing and had a deep desire to identify the Indians. And other people, probably like Christina said, like, well, what's an Indian? Well, you don't look like an Indian. What makes you think you count? So my whole life has been about trying to include those people that perhaps their families or they were on the California roll, but they get no respect, they get no services. They're legally Indians for the purposes of Indian Health Services programs in California, but they get almost nothing else. And so to me, that's such a travesty. In 85, myself and some other folks, we worked on a tuition waiver bill for any American Indian attending a UC campus or a CSU campus. We had some success with that. We worked with Assemblyman Charles Calderon from Montebello. And we got it through all the committees, had the support of Maxine Waters and a lot of other good people in the California Senate and Assembly. And this is emblematic of what Indians go through, as we know. That bill made it all the way to the floor of the Senate for the final vote, and it was scuttled or killed by a Democrat from Santa Barbara who moved that bill into suspense, effectively burying that. And it would have erased any tuition for any American Indian attending a California campus. And so that'd be nice to see that revisited someday, because it's not like it would kill the state of California. I know we have challenges now because of COVID, but that seemed like a winner all the way around, I thought. I worked in Indian education for 14.5 years. I worked in this field of substance abuse. I was an academic at Humboldt State, teaching in Native American studies for 25 years. Over that time, I taught a total of 25 different courses, including issues of genocide. And so my main focus, it seems like the last 20 years, has been lecturing and studying and visiting national archives and interviewing anybody and everybody in my family, my tribe, and other American Indians about that topic of genocide. I've had a chance to lecture a couple of times at California Indian Genocide Conferences at Sac State. And I recently gave a talk about the genocide done against the Tolowa at the American Sociological Association convention in Philadelphia a couple of years ago. And so I was department chair for 4 years as an academic at Humboldt State. Now I'm a retired associate professor. My tribal council work, I serve on our health board. I'm on 6 committees on our health board. We have our main clinic. We have a clinic on our reservation, but also the clinic that's a part of UIHS. We have 6 outlying clinics and 9,000 patients, 9,000 tribal people that live in our region. And let's see. So I wanted to say that my thoughts reflect kind of what other people have said so far. I like the idea of land back, however we can get it back, and co-management is being essential. And I like some of the ideas or thoughts expressed by Governor Newsom, his openness to tribes at this time. So I really laud him and hope that he follows through with some of the requests that we will probably put his way. Let's see what else. There was some. Oh, the one of my overall, one of my concerns is like that in trying to push the discussion forward or to elevate the discussion is like I'm just always bothered when I hear about somebody saying anywhere on PSAs or anything, yeah, we want to promote tolerance. I'm thinking tolerance. Just, what does that mean? A person could sit by a California Indian, at a bus stop or something. No, it has to be respect. And I think that all of our work that we do should be towards building that. And I would hope that similar to Kayleen's comments and others, that we have our traditional teachings. We have those things should be respected. We have a spiritual law. Every tribe has that, and people don't even know about that. Many non-natives, most non-natives probably never heard about that, and would go, really? Or what does that mean? So I would hope that all of our work would point back towards people more widely accepting or becoming aware of and accepting some of our thoughts, about our core spirituality and the efficacy of our teachings. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really wonderful words, and really hope that this type of council can foster an appreciation of that without an appropriation. And so that'll be another challenge with this council, is how non-native folks interact with this in a mindset of respect and appreciation without taking all of the good things that come out of this and co-opting them. But that's a conversation for another day, probably. And thank you. We'll now move to the southern region. And then just for awareness, there are a couple of comments that we'll get to just before the lunch break. And then I think that we will push the next agenda item till after lunch, if that's acceptable for everybody. But we'll move to the southern region, and we will start with Chairwoman Angela Elliot Santos.
Alka and Chaway, Nyaj Angela Elliot Santos, Nyaj Leroy and Judy Elliot Pachai, Nyaj Snaukatun Kaman. My name is Angela Elliot Santos. I'm the daughter of Leroy and Judy Elliot. I come from Manzanita, which its old name was Snaukatun. So I'm very honored to be part of this with all of you. My main focuses are actually the title of this, Truth and Healing. I have watched too many young people that are so full of anger because of the dehumanization that our people have suffered without any acknowledgement. And they are told, well, so what? Forget it. Leave it in the past, move on. But how can you move on when the truth has never been told? That's the part that it pains me, when young people pass on and their anger was never healed. And that flows on and on until we actually take these steps. And so to see Governor Newsom take the steps, I know when he first started talking about and apologizing for what happened, I said it's only words unless there are actions behind it. And so to see these actions, it's a great thing. Healing the youth is the main focus. Letting them know that Native Americans are allowed to have religion and that we're humans, and acknowledging the bounty that was put on our head, acknowledging that this beautiful land that we live in was so coveted that we were some of the most devastated natives in this land. And I agree with all the things that I've heard today. Cultural resource protection is a big issue for Manzanita. The valleys around us that are owned by BLM are now full of wind turbines, and that's not a bad thing. We also agree renewable energy, but it needs to be done right. First, they put through the Sunrise Power Link, and they put lattice towers that birds of prey are attracted to, and then they put windmills so the birds of prey fly off the lattice towers and into the propeller blades. They're industrializing the place where we live without any regard for the idea that that's our only piece of land. And so land back, absolutely, but also protection of all of the sites, all of the rich, beautiful sites that are never, the story is never told. A few miles from the Manzanita Reservation is the Eco Substation site. My dad was the chairman at Manzanita from 1999, the late Leroy J. Elliot. He, from 1998 until he passed on in 2015, he helped fight the projects that were in Ocotillo. And when I say fight, I guess we wanted a seat at the table, and not the little kids' table, the real table. We wanted to have, and we had to say things like, hey, we don't sign our names with X's anymore. We're here, we have attorneys, we want you to listen to us. Meanwhile, they just kept devastating the area. Cremation sites, human remains, cairns that were 2,000 years old, knocked over by workers that were looking at our tribal monitors, and they said things like, what are you guys protecting out there? It's not like it's the ancient pyramids. No, we've been here thousands of years before the ancient pyramids were constructed. So those things that we were protecting, they meant everything to us, but we were so disregarded that we had to constantly fight. So when Eco Substation was being built, people came and looked at my dad in the face and said, Chairman Elliot, there are no archaeological sites on this property. First visit out there, a hand-tooled shell on top of the ground. They uncovered so many hearths, so many agave roasting pits. They told us, you know what, you don't need monitors for anything below 6 feet because there will be nothing there. My dad told them, no, that's not true. This is an area of high wind and rain and erosion. Of course you're going to find it because we've been there for thousands of years. So 25 feet below the ground, they were still bringing out Kumeyaay artifacts. They recognized the layers that were there. They did their testing, 12,000 years old. That site, the horrible thing, it's making the hairs on my arm stand up to talk about the devastation to that site. But what I would like to see is, where is that knowledge being taught to the children? That somewhere in San Diego County, there's a site that is 12,000 years old. So when my kids are angry and my tribal youth are angry, I tell them, remember who you are. Your people have walked this land for 12,000 years. But you never hear of these things because it's pushed aside. It's out of the archaeological record. It's not mentioned. The beauty of how our people lived, the knowledge that we ate almost all of the animals and we grew the plants in Mission Valley. They turned out 19,000 animals and ate it down, and then it eroded. So you have to look at how we cared and how we managed for the land, and then boom, one day, pinned up on the windiest side of the hill that you can imagine. And if you look at Constance Dubois' writing, she's talked about in front of Congress the plight of the Mission Indians. And in one of her sections, she said, but have you seen Manzanita? 57 people live on a piece of land that wouldn't feed one family in a healthful way. So I asked my dad, how did we survive? How did we survive when we couldn't get to the deer and we couldn't get to the ocean and we couldn't get to the desert? And he said, well, the old people knew how to get the wood rats. The old people did whatever they could to survive through the worst desperation and dehumanization that you can imagine. One day while looking at old census rolls, my cousin and I, my brother in our way, he's my brother, we found our great grandmother, and at the end of the rolls, she buried both of her daughters. We didn't know that. No one told us the devastation that she felt having buried both of her children in the same year. And then she went on to have more. And she had my grandma, and that's the only reason I'm here, because she had the strength that I don't have. I don't know if I could bury my children and then want to have more when the future looked that bleak. But that's the strength. That's why we're all here, sitting on this commission, hoping to bring truth and healing, because it's real and it happens. And I see it in my family and I see their anger. And I just want the healing to happen, because everywhere that we go, everything that we say, we have to prove, we have to fight. When we fight projects that are going on federal land and other projects went through 20 years before or 30 years before, and you ask BLM, where's the records for that? Oh, well, we'll find them. We'll get you a copy of them. Our old people, our elders are the backbone of who we are. They've said this. They've said all of these things and they've been buried. It's time to bring it all forward. It's time to give us that seat at the table. Give us the recognition. Help us heal for real. And I hope that's what this commission does, because the children of this state need to know about the beauty and the diversity of this region and the people who lived in it and managed it. And why was it so pristine when those boats landed? Because it was managed and cared for. It was our mother. It was our life. I was devastated because I did grow up in Northern California. So hello to all of you from Northern California. I grew up in the Redwoods in Crescent City and Brookings, Oregon. And when I learned that there's only 10% of the redwood forest left, that means they came here and they chopped down 90%. Can you guys imagine what California looked like before that act of devastation? All monetary, all without regard for those ancient trees. There is nothing like standing in the redwood forest. I want the politicians that are part of this state and the federal government to take recognition of our people and quit disregarding them. And until that happens, we will see more of our young people and their anger and their choice to use drugs or alcohol to calm their nerves. I have seen too many people be gone that has broken my heart. It's unacceptable. And so I hope that all of us together on this commission can make a real difference. And yes, I know it's going to be hard. I heard that part, and I know what all of our issues are. I was elected to my tribal council in 1998 when my dad became the chair, and I didn't know what I was in for at 25 years old, and the politics of it. And what Christina said is true. The colonialism that has seeped its way into our governments and our people that we need to change. But I asked a person one time about the language, and they looked at me and they said, well, if you thought that teaching your children a language would mean their sure death, would you teach your children that language? And that broke my heart, because that is true. Our people were all about survival. And sometimes that even meant hiding who we were and taking away that culture so that their kids could live. I also want to say that something has to happen. I know there are equal laws, but it still doesn't matter. When you work with your county, you work with the protection services, it never works out for our kids. And I ask everyone who's listening to this, can you imagine if a car could pull up in your driveway and people from the state get out? And this did happen to my dad and my uncles. There was a sweep in East County where they came and they took all the children on the reservation because surely their parents had to be alcoholics. So they came and they took my dad and my uncles. But my grandpa, he knew a man from Hakamba, and that man was non-Indian, and he employed my grandpa, and he took him down to the courthouse and said, John Elliot is a good man. He works for me. He can take care of his kids. And my grandpa got my dad and my uncle's back. That was the only reason that my dad knew the songs and spoke the language, because he got to live there at Manzanita with his father. But that car pulled up and took his kids. I can't imagine. I would be arrested if they pulled up and tried to take my kids just because Indians must be alcoholics. These aren't not true stories. These things happened to my family. And because of that, there has been much heartache, and it's time to end that cycle. And that's why I'm proud to sit here with you all while we end this cycle, while we heal all these areas, and while we bring humanity back to the Native people of California. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Really powerful words. And I think those sentiments are shared by this entire council. You know, I think that your words on ICWA specifically are really poignant. Having counties come in and take children away because of cultural differences or because of situations that the state itself, the feds and the counties created is unacceptable. It's, you know, another form of genocide. And so really appreciate those words. Really appreciate your sentiments about the redwoods, because I agree there are relatives. They're surviving these wildfires. They're just, you know, there's probably some sort of poetic way of saying that that's not going to come to my mind, but I think that this council can see in the fact that they're still here despite catastrophe, and that I think that everybody here can feel. So really appreciate those words, really appreciate your passion, and I think you've expressed why we're all here. So thank you very much. Vice Chairwoman Tishmal Turner.
Me again. Good morning. I'm Tishmal Turner. I'm the vice chair for the Rincon Band of Luceno Indians, and I'm serving my second term, and we have a 2-year terms, and we'll know in 9 more days if I get to carry my title as vice chair, because I'm up for re-election and being challenged. I grew up on the Rincon Indian Reservation. My father is Dennis Turner, and he was one of the original occupants of Alcatraz Island. And last year we went out to Alcatraz for the 50th anniversary. And it was really, you know, I thought they did this 50 years ago and we're still fighting for the same things that my parents did 50 years ago. And but things are different now because, you know, we have, you know, used education to be able to make our reservations better. I grew up on the reservation when it wasn't popular to be Indian, and for myself, firsthand saw, you know, a lot of poverty, loss of our culture and our language and ceremonies, and really have been able to be part of that revitalization that is so important to our tribal nations. I have served for the last 13 years as a tribal liaison for California State University, San Marcos, and you know, have been in that role, bridging a higher education institution that, you know, hasn't always been embraced by tribal communities, and in essence, walking in two worlds and trying to bridge academia with tribes, and, you know, really educating academia and higher education on tribal sovereignty. And, you know, I really am looking forward to serving with all of, you know, these esteemed leaders, and honored to be part of this. I've also been for the last 2 years serving on the UC Critical Mission Studies project and learning about these really untold stories, and you know, really from natives, California natives, telling our own narrative. And there's so many stories to be told. I've worked in, you know, education, but also economic development for my own tribe, and really want, you know, future generations to and even for this current generation to not be shameful of being Indian or telling our own stories. And hopefully through this important work that we are, being part of, that other Californians will also be proud of the rich heritage and culture that we all share. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Really wonderful words. And now we'll end on Robert Phelps.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh, fantastic. I'm sorry. My wife is actually, because of COVID, teaching one of her college classes, and we're sharing internet. So I've had some issues here with my connection. My background is, hi, I'm Robert Phelps. My background is I'm a member of the San Pasqual Band of Mission Indians of California, which is in northern San Diego County. We are Kumeyaay people. I have served in the past as the vice chairman of my tribe. I've also chaired a number of tribal committees and worked on some special projects for the tribe from long distance. Long distance because I am a tenured associate professor of history with a specialty in the history of California from California State University, East Bay, which is in Hayward. I am right now, as some of you who are academics, you can either be in the teaching mode, faculty mode, but right now I'm in administration. I am currently the executive director of my university's branch campus in Concord, California. And although I miss teaching a great deal, I really love this administrative task because our campus is actually at the foot of Mount Diablo. It's a 387-acre campus, and Mount Diablo was sacred to many of the Bay Area tribes, so it's really a pleasure and an honor to be in charge of so much acreage at the foot of that mountain. I was inspired to join this committee really because just by coincidence, I was a member of what we call the Indigenous Acknowledgement Collective at my university, which just began a few months ago. And we are involved in a number of initiatives involving Native peoples in the Bay Area, and one is the repatriation of tribal remains. As many of you know, many universities actually hold the remains of individuals of our people, particularly in departments of anthropology or archaeology, and we're working on repatriating them to various Ohlone communities in the Bay Area. And fortunately, we've had a really supportive administration, and that's not true for all universities, but it's a really important topic for myself and some of my colleagues. And it was through that initiative that we're still engaged in that I found out about this body, and I decided to seek the approval of my tribe for nomination. They did and supported me, and I'm pleased to be with all of you. What the issues that are important to me, and I will be brief just because we're kind of against the time gun, but land back is certainly of interest to me. I think there's a need in California to push the recognition of non-federally recognized tribes. This is particularly true in the Bay Area. Again, we've worked quite extensively at my university with Ohlone peoples, and it tends to be in the area where the California gold rush happened. Where tribes were disappropriated their land very quickly, very suddenly and disastrously. And we have to make that right. And I'm hoping that somehow we can push forward that and those types of initiatives in this body. I am also particularly interested in, and this has actually been said earlier by a number of our council members, in issues that are important to urban Indians. And I think this is because of my own background. Many of the tribes in Southern California were resettled on reservations that were on land that could not be farmed. Florence Shippick, if some of you know, famous anthropologist who wrote about Southern California Indians, entitled her book "Pushed into the Rocks." That's exactly what happened to my band. And because it was impossible to cultivate the land that we were placed on, we were taken away from our traditional tribal homeland, many of my tribal members eventually just kind of started to go to cities and towns because they couldn't eke out a living on reservation property. One of them was my grandfather, Jose Dolores Martinez. And he actually was employed by the city of San Diego as the beach keeper and the beach cleaner of the city of San Diego. And I've desperately, for all my life, been trying to find photographs of him cleaning beaches or in San Diego parades, because my mother said that she used to ride with him, this Native American man who, was forced to leave his tribal homeland and go into the city to find work. But she was in a number of parades with him, and I'm still looking for photographs of him either doing his work or in some type of ceremony. And our tribe held together because even though we were dispersed, we met regularly. Even as a child, I remember as my first memory is 4 or 5 years old, journeying back to our reservation where very few people lived, and to have tribal ceremonies and tribal meetings and holding those things together. And because we're in the Bay Area and so many of the constituent tribes of this region don't have reservation land, don't have a meeting place, they are not necessarily connected well with services they might have, with information they might have. And I'm very interested in seeing if we can eke some type of arrangement or some type of improvement in the condition of these peoples. I'm also interested, for obvious reasons, in education. And I'll just tell you before I wrap up, one side story. I have a son who has muscular dystrophy. And because of that, he's actually mainstreamed. He's doing extremely well, but he does need some assistance, some physical assistance to attend classes. So because of that, my typical day is I spend the mornings with him in his classes, and then I go to work at my university. And therefore, I am going through K-12 education. He's actually in the 7th grade this year. I'm going through K-12 education for the second time in my life because I'm with him. And I have watched with him and assisted him in projects having to do with the teaching of Native American history. And I completely agree that with everything that has been said on this council about the teaching of Native American history, the lack of depth, the lack of understanding. It's not that the teachers are at fault. He has had nothing but wonderful teachers, but the curriculum is very shallow. The curriculum still speaks to romantic Spanish past. Native Americans are really just seen as kind of an afterthought. This is the way California developed, and oh, by the way, there are these people over here. And talking to some of his friends, they were under the impression that Native Americans didn't exist anymore. And so everything that's been said on this council this morning in regards to improving in the California educational system in regards to how it deals with the Native American history and Native American culture, I completely agree with. I'm very interested in trying to assist this council with bringing that forward. And thank you.
Thank you. And I think some of the points you've brought up and some of the other council members have brought up also speak to the fact that a lot of what you're going to be examining has modern day impacts. So for example, I was on a broadband listening session the other day where we heard about the mapping of broadband and how you can actually see it goes right around tribal lands and then continues on the other side. There's a lot of infrastructure that ends just a mile from tribal lands. And so while a lot of your people are near or in or kind of near your tribal lands, if you have land, you're definitely not in places that are hospitable to life. With that said, there are a couple things in the chat that I want to address real quick. Probably the main one that I'd like to just speak to before we break for lunch is the idea of the term of this council. And so it is created via executive order. It is under the executive order supposed to go through 2025. Again, if that is under the same governor, then that should not be affected. If it's under a new governor, then it will create, there will be need to be support from that governor to not rescind that executive order. Because executive orders are in effect until they're rescinded, regardless of the governor in charge. That said, if this is something that the council would like to have be a more long-term, bigger effort, it can also look at doing that in statute, and there are a number of ways to do that. And so we can have that discussion as well if this council would like that to be something that we contemplate, is that if this is a more long-term effort. I would recommend that if that is something that the council wants to consider, and we can have that discussion later because we are heading up against the lunch hour, that we stick to some timeframes for at least initial findings so that things are moving, and it keeps us moving, and it keeps the state accountable for whatever it's providing. But again, just want to put that out there that those are some of the options that we're looking at. I think with that, we will break for lunch if everybody is amenable to that. Okay, I'm seeing nodding heads, and we'll see you around 1. We may have a bit of a delay start. The governor has a press conference in about 5 minutes. And so some of us are gonna go look at that, and we'll see you around 1, but maybe a little bit after. So see you in a bit. Thank you.
Christina?
Yes, Chairman.
Do you want us to log out and log back in?
I think, James, that they can stay on if they want. Is that correct?
Yeah, the meeting's not going to be dropped. I'm going to put up a slide that says you guys are on break, and you guys can stay connected or leave and rejoin as you feel the need.
Great. So I would say mute and undo your video, or you can leave and rejoin. Your link is specific to you, so you can just keep using that link throughout the 2 days. Thanks.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hi, James. Are we live?
Yeah, I mean, the meeting never really ended, so everybody's still here in the meetings, attendees and panelists.
But can they see us now?
Yes, they can see you.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I'm going to get started. The governor's press conference is still ongoing, but we have some folks that are paying attention in case anything strange comes up. The first part of this agenda item is mostly presentation, so it's okay if council members kind of trickle in over the next bit. I'm still going to cut us off at the hard end of 3 p.m. Because we do have some time tomorrow afternoon to discuss some of the things if we don't get to them today, if that's okay with all of the council members. Good. Okay. I want to be respectful of time and know that we only slated this until 3. And we do have all afternoon to kind of go through some of these things again. So am I able to share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to.
Okay, perfect. So we are now on, and welcome back, everybody. We are now on the overview of the executive order, consultation responses, and draft charter. If we don't get to the second half of the day with the process of appointing non-voting members and creating subcommittees, and then the selection of cultural wellness practitioners, we can always push those to tomorrow afternoon. And it may make sense to do so, just given that we'll be going through kind of a line by line on the charter, and it would make sense to incorporate the non-voting and subcommittees there. So I'm going to share my screen now.
Christina,
Yes.
you're showing the presentation view currently.
This better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, great. So this is similar to what I went over at the outset of this before we seated the council, but for those of you that haven't seen it, wanted to make sure, and for those of you participants who have not seen this, wanted to make sure everybody was aware of how everything is at this point. Again, all of this beyond the executive order are things that are draft, and so they're subject to change based on the direction of the council. And then also there are some limitations based on our limits under state law, but the charter itself is still in draft form and won't become final until the council signs it. So just as a basic overview, as I mentioned earlier today, the council is a council created by the governor via executive order, and it's made up of representatives from California Native American tribes, but can also include relevant state and local agencies and other relevant non-governmental stakeholders. It's led and convened by the tribal advisor and is limited term, depending upon its issuance of its final written report on January 1st, 2025. And this is something that was brought up by the council members as to whether it might be advisable to find another mechanism for the council to continue work beyond then. And I think we can have that discussion as well. Under the executive order, the council is charged with bearing witness to recording, examining existing documentation of, and receiving California Native American narratives regarding the historical relationship between the state of California and California Native Americans in order to clarify the historical record of such relationship in the spirit of truth and healing. It is required to report annually and submit a final written report of findings to the Office of the Tribal Advisor by January 1st, 2025. And it aims to reflect a holistic understanding of the historical relationship between California Native Americans and the state, and will be modeled on similar truth and reconciliation reports examining relations between national and subnational governments and indigenous populations using an international human rights framework. And you'll hear more about some of those tomorrow, and whether those reports and the structure was effective, whether there would be something that they would do differently, and whether those reports are being used in the way that they should be being used. Will the council examine reparations? Yes, under the draft charter, the council can examine and make recommendations aimed at reparation and restoration, and consider how to prevent similar depredations or policies in the future. The draft charter, as well as other international models, is available at the resources page, and I'll pull it up so that we can go through it. And we'll go through, I think, we'll read through it so that everybody can see it. And then the line by line, if there are any edits that need to be made, we'll do tomorrow. The council is organized under a charter and is made up of voting members and non-voting members. There are 12 voting members, all of which must be representatives from California Native American tribes. And those are tribes that are on the list maintained by the Heritage Commission. How we've structured it based on feedback is that there are 12 voting members, but we've also got alternates in the event that those voting members are not available. And that's so that we can maintain quorum, given that we have a pretty substantial amount of seated tribal leaders that may have constraints on their time. The charter is currently in draft form and will become final upon signature of the voting members of the council. Of the 12 voting members, 3 members each must be from southern, central, northern, and eastern geographical areas of the state. And for these areas, one of the 3 appointed voting members needs to be from a non-federally recognized tribe. Based on feedback from the listening sessions, as I said, we added the alternate voting members. And part of the reason why we have a vacancy in the southern section is because we have that designated seat for a non-federally recognized tribal member. And the tribes, for clarity, for that vacancy are Juaneño Band of Mission Indians, Juaneño Band of Mission Indians of Ahashiman Nation, Quaimi Laguna Band of Mission Indians, and San Luis Rey Band of Mission Indians. If there's anybody who is interested, it's the same nomination process. The nomination website is still live, even though it's not linked from the main page. And so what I'll do is relink it to the main page with the explanation that we are still seeking a representative for that seat. That nomination process will be open until the last day of January, just to give folks time to do what they need to do to get support letters and make sure that that process is fair. So if you know anybody, again, it's tribal leader letter of support or resolution, but also we appreciate community support, as that will help us make our decision. Again, we like to have tribal diversity. So if there are too many Pomos on the council, for example, we don't want to do that, given that there's so much diversity up and down the state. So that's something that we will be considering. And again, that page is tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC/nominate. If you are all interested in taking a look at the regions there, but it's basically San Diego and Imperial counties. And again, that will be open until the end of January. We'll be collecting nominations. Membership as a voting member is available to duly elected officials or appointed designees, and they'll be compensated a per diem. This is for all voting and alternate members for each day of the quarterly meetings. They'll also have their reasonable travel expenses covered once we are able to travel again. Whoops, sorry. Here's a structure just in terms of decision-making and authority. The voting members are authorized to direct the work of the council. Non-voting members are here to support the work as directed by the voting members, and also to engage in discussions. And then the public participation in affiliated events can support as well. And it should be feeding the decision-making by the voting members and the discussion by all. So the structure was adopted based on tribal consultation responses, which we'll go over next, and then extensive review of similar international mechanisms. Those mechanisms are available for you to take a look at the resources page, and that's tribalaffairs.ca.gov/CTHC/resources, and they're at the bottom under similar mechanisms. And if you're going to join tomorrow and you want to have some pre-reading, I would take a look at the first couple of items, plus the Canada TRC and the Maine Wabanaki TRC, if you want to kind of read up on some of the things that will be under discussion tomorrow. But we took a look at kind of all of those mechanisms to see lessons learned, what the best structure was, what it felt like was a good size for decision-making purposes to figure out the voting members. And that's kind of what created this structure. We'll also have tribal consultation. And so if you are a tribe on the list maintained by the NAHC, we'll be setting up a time to do one-on-one consultation. Typically, we would be open to traveling for this, but again, given the extreme issues with COVID-19 right now, both in person in our offices and traveling are not happening at this time, though I can accommodate virtual consultations in the event that anyone is interested in doing that on the front end, with the idea that once travel conditions alleviate, that we would have some time to just sit down and chat. The council also welcomes and encourages participation of all California Native Americans regardless of enrollment status. And then also academics are encouraged to participate in the work of the council, whether as non-voting members or in a non-member supportive capacity. And so the council, either if we have time today or in tomorrow's discussion, can discuss whether they want to add non-voting members or not, and whether, if they do, whether those would be limited in term, limited in issue area, or the like. NGOs are also encouraged to amplify and support the work of the council. And then also we welcome partnerships to help provide services, including research and scholarship, documentary filmmaking, emotional community and behavioral support, and media and communications. As Chairman Maccaro mentioned earlier, this is only as effective as it can be if we have broad-based involvement of all of California and all of the community. And so it really is essential that we help, that we get some support in amplifying this message and amplifying the engagement from everybody. In regular times, the council meets on a quarterly basis over 2 days in March, June, September, and December. This is spaced out so that there's room for consultation, for gathering information, because we will be hiring a research specialist to facilitate research and all of that. And that way it's spaced out so that whatever the council directs, we have time to do. That said, in these first few months, if it seems like we need to have a few more meetings in order to get some of these logistic issues out of the way and structure the council, I think that's totally appropriate and up to the council. And then again, everything will be live streamed, recorded, and transcribed so that that's all publicly available. Right now, meetings take place over 2 days, and right now we have 4 hours each day with a 1 hour break for lunch. This is based on experience with Zoom meetings that 2 hours tops at a time seems to be enough for people. And then in a typical framework, day 1 would be dedicated to a facilitated talking circle using the expertise of a culturally appropriate wellness practitioner. And that's something that is up for discussion under this agenda item, but can also be talked about tomorrow if we run up against time. We have not yet secured a culturally appropriate wellness practitioner, but we have had a few meetings. We've had some interest, but felt like it would be inappropriate if we made that call or that decision before the council could consider how they want to approach that. And we can talk about that a bit more once we go through some of these materials. Day 2 is more hearing style presentations, and that will be tomorrow is more of an overview of mechanisms like this, but in a normal meeting, it would likely be presentation based on whatever the council had assigned to be looked at. So whether it's you're meeting in the northern region and you want to hear about everything that happened in that region, or whether it's, you're wanting to do issue area by issue area, it'll be at the direction of the council. Again, everything is virtually right now, but once conditions alleviate, the council will rotate its meeting locations throughout the 4 geographical areas. Okay, I am going to now share the consultation feedback. Unless there are questions at this time. I think I'll just keep going and then we'll open up to panel discussion if that, okay. Okay. James, am I good on this?
Yeah, it's just the webpage or PDF?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is the executive order and this is on the resources page if you'd like to take a look at it. This just is the directive of basically, what is, first it apologizes for the atrocities on behalf of the state of California, but then it orders the establishment of the Truth and Healing Council here. And this is where this language is pulled from about the directive of the council. And so this is why there's like kind of this structure, because that was what was envisioned at the outset. But when this was being drafted, it was drafted with the idea that this council can't be effective unless it's prioritized, the issues that are undertaken are directed by the council based on its priorities and based on community priorities, and that the Native community is in a better position to determine what that looks like rather than the state imposing what it thinks Native populations need to look at in order to move forward and heal together. And so that's why it's a little bit open-ended, and that's why it makes this council's task a little bit more challenging, is that in other truth and reconciliation commissions, they're pretty limited in scope. They might be limited in time. And here, the state did not want to impose any of those limitations on this council. And so it can be as open or as closed in scope as dictated by the council. The second thing is that in drafting this, the state looked at other mechanisms, truth and reconciliation mechanisms, and determined that it didn't want to create a mechanism that at its outset created an expectation of reconciliation, and that California Native people coming to this mechanism should have a space and tools to heal, but also there's no expectation that the state will be forgiven, or that that the Native population has any burden on it to reconcile all of these awful things that happened here. So that's just for context. And part of this was actually, I will do a name drop here at the suggestion of Judge Abby up at UROC, who's been working and studying some of these mechanisms, and recognized that there was that issue with reconciliation mechanisms, and also suggested this kind of structure. And this whole body is actually her idea. So if anyone sees her, please tell her that she has inspired a whole movement here in the state of California. We'll very quickly go through the consultation report from the consultation feedback that we got throughout the fall of last year. Again, this is an aggregate of everything that we heard. Some of these things were sent to us multiple times. Some of these things were sent to us one time. But so all of it was kind of pulled together so that you could see some of the different and sometimes conflicting feedback that the council got. And this is something you can also look, I would recommend looking over before you discuss issue areas to be examined and timeframes for tomorrow. And then also who might be appropriate to add on to the council in the event that the council wants to expand its membership. I want to make clear too, you are also welcome to expand voting membership as well if you think that is necessary. We did the best we could to create a council that had this diversity of experience, age, all of this stuff. But if it feels like it needs more and can still make decisions with a bigger number, that is also up to you. So we got feedback on the makeup of the council, and that's what drove this consideration and creation of this council. So we heard that non-federally recognized tribes on the list maintained by the Heritage Commission should be included. The council should only include representatives from federally recognized tribes. All tribes should be represented on the council. And that one was like recommending kind of a UN type style of engagement. There should be an even distribution of tribes from Northern, Central, and Southern California, with tribal representatives with multidisciplinary expertise in Native American affairs. The council should be organized into 4 regions, including Northern, Central, Southern, and Eastern. The council should be nominated by tribal governments or communities. Educators should be appointed to the council. The council should include individuals or groups that have done healing work for Native communities. Christian leaders and organizations should be involved in the work of the council. And for context, this was in the context of given that there is so much that has happened at the direction of the church, that there should be a mechanism for them to be able to be a part of this work. We considered that and don't know if it's necessarily something that could be taken under the umbrella of the state, but would welcome anything that could be, done in parallel to this effort for those organizations that would like to engage in this healing work. As I've mentioned in previous presentations, this council is not meant to be and should not be and cannot be everything for everybody. But there is so much space for everyone else to step up and create healing movements in different ways that are kind of under the same umbrella of this goal, without being also everything to everyone. A varied mix of tribal members, leaders in education, and political leaders should be appointed to the council. They should all have a demonstrated history of leadership and experience in relevant areas. Layperson should be included in some capacity in order to gauge the public's knowledge and attitudes toward Native peoples in the state. And council members should be elected tribal officials. So I think based on, and we responded to all of these comments, I don't know if I'll go through these, but I encourage you all to read through those responses. Actually, I will read through them just for everyone's benefit. So we agreed that non-federally recognized tribes should be included. We disagreed that they should be excluded. And we basically, our justification for that was that the historical depredations under examination aren't limited to those tribes that have a legal relationship with the federal government. And that is kind of a key issue in California too, of, this history of termination. And if we're looking really at historical genocide in California, our justification for including everybody, regardless of any type of status, was that, genocide is not restricted to citizenship. So we also, our justification for having a smaller council was that we felt that the number of California tribes, so on the list currently we have around 170 plus or minus, we've just added another one, tribes on that list. And so in terms of decision making, wanted to keep the actual voting size small while being a representative pool of folks that are used to community engagement and respected by the community, but also wanted to keep these meetings and public engagement open to everybody. And then also have that tool of tribal consultation available. We agreed that we wanted to have northern, central, southern, eastern. A lot of times we feel like tribes in the center of the state and the eastern part of the state don't necessarily get captured. So we wanted to make sure that we had that reach. And then we agreed with most of the other recommendations, that there should be educators and that members should be recommended by tribal governments. And then if you want to take a look at all of that, it's in full on the Tribal Affairs website. So then we got comments on the framework for the work of the council. And that was that the council should be organized by charter to reflect the purposes of Executive Order N 1519. So that is why we created the draft charter. It should provide a written report with particularized recommendations for structural reforms for repeated systemic problems that led to the formation of the council. So at the outset of this, there was a little bit of hesitation on the part of state lawyers, but the governor himself authorized our inclusion of in the draft charter examination and recommendation of reparations and restorative actions. So that is now included. The work should be inclusive, forward-looking, and transparent. We're trying to do that to the best of our ability, you know, given the constraints of COVID-19 and also just staffing. The council should establish a committee structure and should be staffed or assisted by properly credentialed professionals and experts in the relevant field to be included in the research and study. And so this is something the council can talk about tomorrow in those committees and who should be leading those. Council should meet at least once every 3 months. Council should meet throughout the state. Tribal wellness practitioners should attend meetings of the council to facilitate healing. The council should allow space and the opportunity for a talking circle and restorative practices. And the council should encourage participation of community members and descendants of perpetrators of violence and depredations against California Native Americans. All of those, as I've already gone over, have been incorporated into the charter. And into the things that the council is currently able to do. Issue areas, and so this is what will be a major focus for tomorrow's discussion, but that the council should examine and report on the historical dispossession of tribal land and water in California, beginning with the 18 unratified treaties through the Smiley Commission report of Mission Indians that supported the Mission Relief Act in 1891, up to the passage of the IRA in 1934, and the state's response to those changes in federal policy. Again, this comment is in the context of, I think, what one of our council members said earlier, that the state, even though the federal government has acted in awful ways, it hasn't been without state support or sometimes state encouragement. And so that's part of this comment. The council should review and report on historical and current funding dedicated to Native American students in California's education system. The council should serve in an advisory role for best practices with respect to future treatment of existing depictions of Native Americans found in public spaces throughout the state that may be deemed derogatory. The council should examine and report on the efficacy of the University of California Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act Oversight Committee. State destinations should acknowledge the ancestral lands of the relevant Native peoples and describe how the land was or currently is used by such Native peoples. The council should discuss the relationship between tribal communities and archaeologists. There's an acute trauma element in the activities of archaeologists that continue to define tribes and their resources without deference to tribal knowledge. There's still a bias towards scientific knowledge over tribal knowledge when it comes to cultural affiliation and the proof of cultural resources and traditional cultural properties. The council should examine issues pertaining to land, water, culture, education, infrastructure, economic development, employment, indigenous health and wellness programs, food sovereignty, health, elder and veteran outreach, urban versus rural Native information, and intergenerational trauma healing. So in that context, some of this seems to be things that are products of the acts of genocide, and some of them seem to be more modern modern things that are going on. And so the council will need to determine how it views its charge. The council should discuss civil jurisdictional approaches and roles, as well as tribal state coordination on crime and jurisdiction. And this is in the context of PL 280. The council should examine educational curriculum and consider options for reintroducing and reinvigorating native languages. And the council should examine educational curriculum and how history and social studies account for native experiences. So on this, we defer to the council to determine all of those issue areas. On some of them, there's statutes that are already in place that should hopefully address some of these things. But again, the council can always take a look at that stuff if it feels it needs to. And then some additional comments. The council should work with the California Center for Native Nations and the University of California at Riverside and the University of California, Los Angeles American Indian Studies program. The council should have dedicated staff to assist the work of the council and stipends for tribal leaders to participate. And so we responded to those as well. And then finally, I'll just pull up the charter, which is also on the resources site. And I will just very quickly summarize because we'll be going on in a deep dive tomorrow. So it starts with the executive order, just so everyone is aware of what the charge is. And then the purposes are to provide for the investigation and establishment of as complete a picture as possible of the nature, causes, and extent of state-sanctioned depredations and prejudicial policies committed during the early decades of California statehood, and the impacts on the descendants and communities of the victims and survivors of such depredations and/or policies. To afford the victims, survivors, descendants, and communities an opportunity to relay the depredations suffered, to report to the governor about such depredations and/or policies, and to make recommendations aimed at the reparation and restoration of the victims, survivors, descendants, and communities of such depredations and/or policies, and prevention of like depredations and/or policies in the future. The council is based on principles of equality, justice, and healing, and all of its members shall reflect this by engaging with each other on a basis of mutual respect and understanding. All members, in order to ensure, to all of them, the rights and benefits resulting from membership shall fulfill in good faith the obligations assumed by them in accordance with the present charter. The council shall ensure that California Native American tribes and California Native Americans who are not members of the council are treated as equals through a lens of historical injustice and shall engage with such parties on such basis. The council shall also encourage California Native American tribes and California Native Americans who are not members of the council to act in accordance with these principles within the confines of meetings and purview of this council. Nothing contained in the charter shall authorize the council to discuss, engage, or intervene in matters outside of its purview. And so that includes, but is not limited to, those matters under the jurisdiction of any California Native American tribe. And this part was included just to make sure that this council did not lose scope, but also did not creep into areas that it had no business creeping into. Here's the membership and composition. We've already gone over that. And then there is a section for removal, and that's any member that has persistently violated the principles contained in the charter. And that will be at the removed from the council by the tribal advisor. A member of the council who no longer serves as a duly elected official or appointed designee. Oh, this needs to actually be changed. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It doesn't need to be changed. We added that appointed designee because if you're still supported by the tribal community that initially supported you, even if you no longer remain as a duly elected official, you can still stay on unless you are no longer supported, and then you will automatically be removed, and then we'll get a new member. The council may vote to add non-voting representatives to the council, which may include representatives of state and local agencies or relevant non-governmental stakeholders and experts. And so that's something that this council will need to discuss how they want to do that. The functions and powers of this council are to facilitate and where necessary initiate or coordinate inquiries into the historical relationship between the state of California and California Native Americans, including historically state-sanctioned depredations and prejudicial policies, the nature, causes, and extent of relevant depredations and or prejudicial policies, including the antecedents, circumstances, factors, context, motives, and perspectives which led to such depredations and policies. The identity of all persons, authorities, institutions, and organizations involved in such depredations and or policies. The question of whether such depredations and or policies were the result of deliberate planning on the part of the state or other group or individual, and accountability, political or otherwise, for any such depredations and or policies. And again, a lot of this language was modeled on the charter for the UN Human Rights Council. So that's why some of this language is the way it is. To facilitate and initiate or coordinate the gathering of information and the receiving of evidence from any person, including persons claiming to be descendants or part of the community of the victims and survivors of such depredations or policies, which establish the nature and extent of the harm suffered by such victims. To engage outside experts, including traditional knowledge holders, historians, librarians, and others, to advise on methodologies, conduct research, share information, and otherwise advance the purposes of the council. Report draft findings to the tribal advisor and prepare a comprehensive final report on or before January 1st, 2025. And then also to make recommendations to the governor regarding the policies and measures aimed at the reparation and restoration of the victims, survivors, descendants, and communities of such depredations and correcting historical injustices. All members have one vote. 8 of the members are required for a quorum, but decisions can be made by a majority of the members present and voting. This lays out the meetings structure, and this is at a minimum, and you can call special meetings as occasion may require. The council will make available culturally appropriate wellness services for each quarterly session to provide participants with tools to process and heal from ongoing and historical trauma. And then I can also call special meetings on my initiative or at the request of the majority of all of you. And we'll try to rotate in all 4 geographical areas. The council will perform its duties with transparency, inclusion, and respect for all experiences, viewpoints, and backgrounds. Where practicable, the council shall encourage all available methods for public participation. Part of this was we made a few edits post-COVID because in person is just not going to happen right now, but wanted to make sure that even with that limitation, that there was still active participation. And then all reports, appendices, everything will be at the website of the tribal advisor. The council will adopt its own rules of procedure and can establish any subcommittees that it wants. All of the agencies under the authority of the governor will cooperate with the council as necessary to carry out the purposes of this charter. And then this is just what I'm able to do, and that is leading and convening, serving as the executive director, and performing any other functions as entrusted by the council and or otherwise provided by law. I'm not a member, but I'll preside over meetings in an administrative capacity and will advise the council on procedures for business of the council and encourage procedures that allow for fair consideration of all issues. And I will endeavor to consult with every tribe on the contact list maintained by the NAHC. And to the extent practicable, we'll endeavor to conform the method, location, and form of each consultation meeting to the individual preferences of each tribe. Amendments can be done with a 2/3 vote, but right now this is in draft form, so there's no vote necessary to make amendments, and then will be ratified as soon as all of you approve and sign it. So that is the basic overview. I'm going to open it up to panel discussion at this time. But we can also take public comment if that is, if folks have comment. But I'll start with panel discussion and I'll go on mute now.
Christina? Mark? Okay, first of all, let me say, notwithstanding the draft charter, all the other materials for the council here, there's a good deal of front-loaded structure that I'm appreciative of, given the amount of time that we have to do what we need to do. I think, and part of this is going to be logistics and procedures, so we're going to have to work through that so that everything is set and we can roll forward from that and get into substance. But so anyway, appreciate all the front end work that went into that. Now, as you were running through, I think the section on scope, I forgot to note to myself what section it was. There was that section you read through about, it was the comments about whether religion, religious groups should be allowed into the process. I had a real strong reaction to that, and I'll just put that forth now. I mean, to the extent that any group is invited to participate in these proceedings as members of the public, I don't think there's much to say about that. To elevate and intertwine, let's say, a Catholic group or something like that, I mean, I think that's going to be well outside the scope of what we're trying to do here. Let me say it this way. The state of California has plenty to be sorry for. There is so much, just when you look at the actions of the state of California, beginning, with the treaties, if you want to start there, the trajectory of everything just associated with the treaties will fill our time. Yet there's so much more. I mean, there's sacred sites. There's all the other issues that everybody discussed today. So, the best I can say, the best light I could put this in is that it's an issue of, scope and undertaking. I think you kind of mentioned that if religious groups chose to do something concurrently, but outside of the direct process we're involved in, I mean, they're free to do that. And of course, I as a lapsed Catholic, I will freely admit that the Catholic Church has lots to be sorry for too. And I would hope that the Catholic Church in California engages in a similar process right now. But not only are they in denial about the things Father Sarah did here under the mission system, they're proud of it and they've doubled down on it. So outside the process, I think, is just by necessity. We need to find the lanes that we are going to operate in to deal with the state and reparations and work from there. So, otherwise we're going to bite off more than we can chew, and this process will never be finished. Because I think it's important to find a finishing point. There needs to be an end point, because in my view, there are some very important deliverables, large and small, all across the board, that I think we need to walk away from to feel some sense of being whole. I can remember when I was, let me just give one little example. This is a small example, but I was a youth, I was a teenager, and I remember going with my dad, and we were going to go fishing in a lake, a state lake, and on state lands, and he had to get a fishing license. And I'm like, why do we have to get a fishing license? These were our lands. Well, that's the state law. State Fish and Game requires, and if they catch you out there without a license, you get a fine or a ticket. And I was struck as a high schooler that was appalling, that on lands that were stolen from us, that an Indian person in this state would have to, even if they were fishing recreationally, not for subsistence, would have to pay to get a fishing license. So that needs to be corrected. And that should, maybe that's a legislative thing, but that's the kind of rub I'm talking about that is here. And there are much bigger ones, but we're not going to have enough time to deal with the reparations that the various religions in this state need to make. So anyway, my 2 cents on that. And then I want to end with a question. I just wanted to know, I have an idea from the context, but what do you mean by state destinations? Are you talking about state parks or anything that's on a map that might be a place of interest, you know, on a Rand McNally map that people need to go to, and it's labeled as a state destination. What, anyway, where did that term come from? Is it a term of art, or what is that?
In the comments that we got,
Is that what it was? Yeah.
that was based on the comments. It was pulled directly from that. So my understanding of it is within the context of that comment, it was talking about state parks, for example, you know, place names, so different county names, Kelseyville, places like that, that felt offensive.
Well, these
And there's
guys-
even more offensive.
Yeah, I have another bag for them.
Okay. And what about the ones over there? Do they need tended to?
No.
James, can we mute Chief
I got
Sisk?
Thank you.
I'm gonna take the eggs because I forgot I need eggs.
Thank you.
I think that's going to be an important thing as well, because when you look at the landscape of this state, there are sacred sites, there are significant sites, there are lands that belong to our ancestors, and I just did it myself. Lands that belong to our ancestors. So we're going to have to make that decision about, you know, not only do we identify that these lands belong, or these lands were lived on, or resource areas for this tribe or that tribe or this group of tribes, but we'll also have to decide things like tense. You know, are we going to speak in the past tense about these people, or are we going to speak in the present tense about these people? So anyway, those were my immediate thoughts, and I appreciate the answer on that.
Appreciate that. And I think you brought up some good items about visibility of Native peoples in modern day and what that looks like, and visibility of Native peoples in modern landscapes. And so I think that is really something this council should think about, because these people are us.
Exactly.
Further comments?
Christina, can I? Oh, sorry, Chief Sick. Did you want to say something?
I was just wanted to make a comment too on the religious thing. Is, you know, our perspective here, you know, that we fight with the Forest Service all the time in using our sacred places for our ceremonies and not paying. We don't want to pay to use our own sacred place that they stole from us and now hold it hostage, creating these images of we want something for free, you know. But also is that, you know, there are, like I tell the Christians that leave our tribe to go and be Christians or whatever, is that, and they come back and they say, oh, you know, those things are the same. Those ways of believing the God and what you guys do is about the same. It's like, well, if it is the same and you believe it, then come back and sing our songs, because there's only a handful of us singing these songs, and there's millions of people singing Amazing Grace. So come back and do this, because the land needs our voices, the trees need that vibration, the fish are waiting for us to send down that drum beat. You know, we have a lot of obligation, not just in, you know, I don't like to say, you know, like going to Sunday school or going to the church. It's like a way of life that is interactive with that whole environment that's waiting for us. And we don't really have the time, you know, and I understand how church has gotten into so many different communities, and a lot of communities, you know, different reservations have, you know, a number of churches involved with their folks. But I always still look at it as every church that's involved with every family is a divider in that family. And my hope is that we bring people back to their own way of life, their own way of believing in the Creator and in things that need us. And so, you know, I need to look at that statement again, but it did catch my eye about the religions part. Whereas I know there are a lot of religious Indians that practice, you know, the amens and all of that on different things that they're putting out. But I am in, I want to spend my energy teaching and showing our young people, you know, our responsibilities to and for the land, and what these songs are about. It's not just songs, but they're for particular things. You don't sing that song, you know, when you go to a funeral. You don't sing this song when you are in a social dance. You know, you don't sing the doctor songs. But we're losing those ways because we're making room for everybody's differences. You know, their ways of doing things, which is fine for some people, I think. But also, I don't want to spend a whole lot of energy, you know, guaranteeing religions that's already guaranteed by the United States Constitution. The rights and the religions of the unrecognized people in this state are not guaranteed. They are not protected, you know. So I think we need to kind of look at that closer and kind of figure out what is it that we want to do about it.
Thank you, Chief Sisk. Before Kusla, I think you had a comment too. One thing to keep in mind as the council, which I don't think is anything that you have to deal with, but with those of you from the public who are listening, who represent, you know, religious organizations or religious influenced organizations, there is also a space beyond doing something like this to help those Native people who do rely on your services for, you know, trauma-informed care. I know there's a lot of Native folks in our communities that rely on religious services to help with, you know, issues with substance abuse and historical trauma. So there is space for that, and there's an opportunity for that as well outside of the context of this council.
Thanks. So one thing I wanted to quickly ask was, what kind of resources are we talking about here that the council will have the ability to kind of leverage in this process? And part of the reason I asked that is you mentioned the hiring of a research specialist to help facilitate some of these processes. And then also I'm thinking about, you know, if we're asking people, if we're going into communities, various communities that are, some of them are ours and some of them are not ours, and we're taking testimony, you know, are we able to offer something to these participants? And so I'm just kind of wondering what kind of resources are at our disposal as we proceed.
So currently, in terms of monetary resources, there is a budget for research scientists, and that is hopefully going to be posted in the next month to be able to facilitate this. I think what will be good is when you hear from the Maine Wabanaki Council, they had someone who did something similar that helped shepherd all of that and made sure that things were going where they needed to go and getting archived properly. But in terms of state resources, there is a small budget that was a little bit more at the outset, but because of the constraints of COVID-19 and the fact that things went into a deficit real quick and aren't projected to be great anytime soon, the budget is less than it was before. It does have resources for all of you and your travel, but does not have resources to cover other folks and any honoraria there, especially given, you know, kind of how many people we're going to have to speak with. That said, this is another area where philanthropy or other partners could really step up, and we encourage that. I would say I don't think that anyone should expect tribes to pay for this kind of thing, but I would say that this is a really good opportunity for all of California to come in and do some restorative and reparative justice. But again, that is neither here nor there. We have invited some philanthropic partners to today and tomorrow, and also have sent them the link for the recording so that they can see what's happening here. And a lot have indicated that they are interested in being involved. So I think that if there are ideas that this council has about what types of things could be supported in terms of resourcing, I think it's easier for philanthropy to work with a list. And so I would encourage you to think about what could be helpful in this space. We've thought of things like, you know, having someone who can help with media and outreach and things like that to amplify the message. But if there are other ways, other things that could be helpful, like supporting fellowships for, you know, members of the UC or whatever it is to help support this work, I think that it's all on the table and we just have to ask.
Christina, this is Isaac. I just wanted to, Chairman McCarl brought up, looking at, do we want to refer to ourselves in the past or the present for all these atrocities? I would say the present. We're here today, because of our ancestors and their resilience, for their strength, everything that they did, we are their dreams. That's something that when I go out and speak, somebody dreamt that we would be here today, that we would sing today, that we would dance today, that we would do these things. This is something that I constantly share when I go out and I speak. And these are prayers that I have, for my young boys, that they'll be interested and that they'll continue along these paths. So I would encourage us to make sure that we are looking at representing in that tense, because unfortunately, there is a misrepresentation, and that's why we're here. That's also a part of that healing, that we might go somewhere to a state park or to a regional park or a county park or different things, and they'll say, oh, the people that used to live here, they're not here no more. They don't exist. They're gone. We constantly hear these things, our misrepresentation of, our songs, of our musical instruments that we use for ceremony, for dance. They might have a different idea of how they're used. I think this is also a part of that process. So I would encourage us, and I thank Chairman McCarl for bringing that up. I think that that's something that we should be looking at to say that it is present, it's still ongoing, and we are very resilient today. We have a strong passion, and we'll be here for thousands of years before. Our ancestors were here since the beginning of time, and we will continue to be here. Thank you.
Christina, if I may, there's a lot of important comments, a lot of information gathered that's taken place, and a lot more that we need to do to really get a balance of concerns from Indian country and the state of California here. Earlier, you mentioned, the executive order versus statute, and I think that's an important discussion that we need to have. I certainly don't want to take away from the generosity that the governor has provided us through this executive order, and we appreciate that. But executive order is not law, and the Wabanaki, they were able to come up with a report in 27 months. We're estimating up to 5 years. Well, at the end of all this, we certainly don't want to just have a report. We want to be able to focus on reparations, restorative actions. We want to make sure that the confidence that the folks that put us here, that to support that and come up with progress. And so, I don't know what kind of support we would have, to move beyond an executive order through statute, but we've got a lot of representatives here from around the state, and it would be nice to have additional ownership from our state representatives, supporting a statute and really solidifying a solid path for us to move forward and be able to come up with more than just a report.
Thank you. I appreciate that comment. And knowing that that is something that this council is wanting, we can start exploring that within the governor's office, because the governor can help with some of this. We're on live stream. I don't know if I can say more than that, but we will start looking into that. Anna, feel free to go like this to me. But thank you. I appreciate it, Chairman. Vice Chairman, you had a comment?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the work to draft the documents. It's organizational document drafting is one of my least favorite things to do in this position, although some people really get into it. I did have a question. One of the things I feel like want to make sure we're doing as we're moving forward, I would, for the rest of the council here, I hope I hope we can get a draft approved here shortly and get it in the books and get this phase of the council behind us. I think what I'm hearing and what I'm trying to push to is for us to move and not get kind of stuck in the loop of having a perfect organizational document before you actually start getting some boots on the ground. I did have a few questions. One of them, just to check, Christina, are we looking to try to get this approved over the next 2 days?
That's something for the council to consider. So if it looks like it's way off base and you want to kind of do a lot of more work on it, then we can do that, and we can not approve it and have it kind of sit a bit and toss it around for more feedback, consultation, whatever you all want to do. If it looks like it's in a good place for approval, or needs just minimal amendments that we could do tomorrow, then you can go ahead and approve, and we'll send it around for signature after tomorrow's meeting, and we can do e-sign on that, and then it'll go into effect.
And I think this should be something that we should test for this council on whether or not we can work together, whether or not we can get a draft for approval. I think for me, it's kind of the test to see if we can actually move something together. And I would encourage everyone to kind of have that same thought, right? Can we get on the same page enough to get the first little thing out the door or not? I've also encouraged us, the council, to not maybe get as in depth into this document as you might otherwise. I think if you keep it nice and clean and straightforward, we can have discussions later on, bylaws, makeup of committees, that whole kind of running down. I did have a few suggestions, though, and wondering what the rest of the council thought about whether there's going to be follow-up documents, i.e. bylaws or not. And then also a question which may not be relevant at all, any thought of adding additional members that are specific to age? For instance, each of the districts potentially having one member in each district that is under the age of 18 was one of the things I know I'd heard in the past, and maybe something we can kick around. Thank you.
Thank you. And before council members kick that around, just want to clarify, bylaws, all of that, up to you if you want to have that procedure or whatever you want to do. Also, with adding members, totally acceptable. Other options, given that under 18 could age out of being under 18 pretty quickly, given the time frame of this council, it might be an option to have an annual appointee per region, or even a youth council that's associated with this, so which would be a subcommittee. So all up to you, all on the table, and I'll open that up for discussion. And to clarify, we did get a comment in one of the listening sessions that they did want youth representation. Why we didn't make it compulsory within the draft charter was that we wanted to leave it to the council to consider whether that was something they wanted youth to be engaged in or not, given that the subject matter is kind of icky. That said, we're not trying to be overprotective here, just want to make sure that the council is comfortable and does what it thinks is right.
I don't have a lot to say about it, but just hearing it, I like the subcommittee idea myself, of there being some kind of youth council.
So Christina, just to be clear, the charter does authorize us to create subcommittees, right? So that's not something that has to be in the charter itself, right? So presumably we don't have to make that decision in the context of the charter.
Not necessarily, unless you wanted it to be mandatory. Or if you wanted them to be voting members. But in the context of the charter, if they came on as non-voting members, totally acceptable. Or if they came on as a subcommittee, we don't need to make any changes. Yes, Vice Chairman.
My apologies. Can I ask a question to the council? For my fellow council members, is this draft charter something we'd like to get done in the next 2 days?
Can we answer? I mean, you're asking for feedback. In the read through or the run through we just did, I didn't say anything that jumped out at me that was of concern, really. I mean, my comment on your comment, my written comment on in the chat to your comment, Vice Chairman Myers, is in this effort, I think beginning here, when something is in pretty good shape, we should recognize that and be willing to put it into action. We could spend a month or two. I think many of you have probably been on boards, councils, or ad hoc groups where you can spend a year on an organizational document trying to get it to a stage of perfection. The goals here, I think, to be operational, though, so we can get to the merits of what it is that we all feel we were appointed to do. Now, if there's something glaringly, in need of correction, well, let's do that and put it on the table. Otherwise, though, my first reading of this as we went through this, and I had a chance to review it a little bit last night too, Christina, is it's in pretty good shape as is.
Robert? You are, oh, there we go. You're muted again. James, can you help him?
Yeah, I'm asking him to unmute. He should be able to unmute himself. There's usually a window that pops up. Ask to unmute there, Robert. Not sure why your mic's not working, but if you're Robert, if you want to test this out, if you go down by the mute button, there's a little arrow that points upwards. If you go test speaker and microphone, that will take you through the process of enabling your speakers and your microphone.
And I saw you go off mute for a second, so I know it works.
I
There we go.
apologize. I don't know. I'm having technical issues here because I've been at my university thousands of Zoom meetings over the last few months, so I actually don't know what's going on. But I think the document is in really good shape, and quite frankly, I think if we can get it done within the next, by the end of the day tomorrow, that would be a major accomplishment. We can move forward, and frankly, I don't think. Are we all going to be on a listserv? I'm assuming like an email listserv. And I think that would be really helpful so that since we're not going to meet for 3 months, maybe occasionally we can take care of some business that's fairly minor or prepare our thoughts, share our thoughts before the next meeting on some major issues. If we have a listserv and we can have some kind of offline discussion, there's a lot of apps for that. And so when we come into these meetings, decisions could pretty much already be made. We just have to take the formal vote at a meeting. So any type of listserv or any type of community software we could use, I think that would really be helpful to keep pushing us forward and we don't get bogged down on discussions every 3 months. But for the specific issue of the document, I think it's ready to go and we could probably get it done with some amendments by the end of tomorrow.
Thank you. And I think there was another comment, but we do run up against some limitations with state law in terms of transparency. And so doing kind of a listserv is not always ideal in terms of being transparent. But I think that we can figure out a way to be able to continue to move the work forward without having 2-day meetings every month. We could possibly hold special meetings in the interim with the same, per diem and everything that are just like an hour or two to get business done. If that is helpful, at least in the first initial phases, so that we can have those documents free to work on and then do a working session and then keep moving, if that sounds right. So we have the question, these type of things are, we are subject to some state laws. We are also not necessarily subject to some state laws. We'd have to be in statute to be totally exempt from certain things. So that's the fudgy answer. What we're doing is complying with all of the state laws that we might have to comply with in the event that we are, this council is covered, but that's the fudgy answer from a legal perspective. Councilmember Harper, I think you had a comment.
Yes, I had a question really. If we were to move forward with the document, would there be any restriction against amending it in the future if we run up against problems that we didn't foresee?
Nope, the only thing is in it, you have, I think you need 2/3 vote rather than a simple majority to change it, but that's all.
Okay, thanks.
Vice Chairman? Now we can't hear you.
2/3 of quorum or 2/3 of all members?
Of course you had to ask.
Savvy question.
Let's see.
I don't want all the central and southern folks getting together and voting.
2/3 members.
Already, yeah. We're not going to do that, right? We'd never do that.
So under the charter as drafted, it's 2/3 of all members. Kind of like how you have to have a certain number of all your members to change your constitution, which is why constitutions never get changed. Chairman?
Just a follow-up. Councilmember Harper mentioned that right now, and I had a similar question, but basically, if we adopt in the next, well, as soon as practicable, once everybody has a level of comfort, we're not carving the adoption of the charter into stone. It can be amended, and it's a little tougher for 2/3, but I mean, we're all here to move the ball forward. And, I think if it's truly necessary to make a change or an amendment, it should be manifest enough and we should be able to do it. So I like that. Anyway, thank you.
And did we have any public comment either, James?
Yeah, we have one hand raised. I'm going to remind the audience, though, that there is the raise your hand function that you can use in Zoom. And if you are dialing in, you press #2 to raise your hand. But Vincent Feliz is raising his hand currently.
Okay, if it's okay with council, can we open that up just because we're hitting against time? Okay, perfect. He can go ahead and make his comment.
Okay, Vincent, you've been allowed to unmute yourself.
So I just want to thank you. I'm sure there's a lot of work done today and folks might be exhausted and getting into your meeting. I raised my hand. I felt like risky to do that. I didn't want to interrupt as you all were talking, but it's close to 3 o'clock, so I wanted to do that. So I'm a Chumash descendant from Bakersfield, California. I'm also very honored to be associated with some people that are on your council here. I go even way back. I don't mean to put her name out there, but she might laugh. But Colleen Sisk, I worked for Seventh Generation Fund 20 years ago. And I remember going to Watts in South Central, talking about sacred site protection in the middle of talking to our French ambassador. And we had to do it like under covert, quiet, kind of under the covers to do that to make sure no one knew from the State Department. But I'm born and raised in Bakersfield. My father is Jim Feliz, goes by Feliz. He attended being raised by a single American Indian woman in Bakersfield. Her maiden name is Del Cid. My family is, her name is Antonio Del Cid, born in the late 1800s. I'm the youngest of 10 children, so my parents are fairly old. My dad's 88 and still alive. But my grandmother, as my dad has told me, was part of the San Sebastian Reservation that was there at Fort Tejon. And it's the village of Tinlich, which is the eastern side of the Chumash territory. I've been doing traditional ceremonies going home for solstice at Mount Pinos, which we know as Iwihinimuhu, for 20 years now, doing ceremony for solstice, summer and winter. Something compelled me to be a part of this. I saw it on Twitter. And just not that I guess we could talk about professional credentials. For 21 years, I've been a social service provider. I have a master's in social work from Cal State Long Beach. I'm a proud graduate of Humboldt State University. Professors like Joe Giovanetti, other people I know, Frankie Joe and his family from up here. My wife is Yurok and Kaduk. My children are both Yurok tribal members, but all I can say is I'm a Chumash descendant. The Chumash territory went from San Luis Obispo to Malibu, Eastern, all the way into Kern County. I would like my father not to die, to be enrolled in a tribe before he passes away. It's an old thing in California. It hurts my heart. Santa Ynez is not the only tribe in Chumash country. I have a lot of Chumash friends from Santa Ynez, and I respect what they're doing. Tejon just got their federal recognition. Tejon members actually had the nerve to call my father and talk to him in the last 10 years, pick his brain for family tree information, and then had the nerve not to enroll him. He's 88. My auntie just passed away in August. She was 95. They've been on the census rolls since 1932. So I'm still gonna practice no matter what, but when I hear about the charge of what this council can do, perhaps the advocacy and the facilitating of helping the tribal folks that are still out there. Living in the city of Bakersfield, it's not easy. We have more Choctaws than we do Chumash people, Katanamuks, Yalamne Yokuts. You folks in Southern California, you know what I'm talking about. Because of the Relocation Act, we are competing against Navajos and Lakotas for recognition, for cultural traditions and songs and singing. And I appreciate Colleen bringing up the fact that about sacred site ceremony areas, we use Los Padres National Forest, and Chairman Khan, it's nice to see you here. I've heard a lot of good things about you. You have a non-Indian or a non-Chumash tribal member there who's been a great service for tribal people for a long time. That's Pete Zavala. He has hosted me and my father, and I want to honor him and his daughter and his granddaughter. We go with Pete to go to our sacred site areas, but we have to have a ranger go with us to unlock gates to get to our petroglyphs, to have ceremony. That's a Southern California and Central California issue. So this commission, if you could talk about what that's like. Or when we have ceremony, I have a Boy Scout troop staring at us, giving us dirty looks as we're trying to do prayers and sing because we're in their way. Or a guy sitting on a mountain bike wondering when we move so he can ride his bikes on our sacred mountain. I would like to go to his church and ride my mountain bike down his aisle during a wedding and see how he feels about that. But I digress, of course, but I'm just wondering if there's a mechanism to help. I am not a federal law or sovereignty expert. I'm a social service person. I work with Indian child welfare. I worked for United Indian Health Services for 7 years. I'm now currently working at Northern California Indian Development Council in Eureka. I do a lot of advocacy on the state level of child welfare. I have throughout the years with cultural competency. As I said, I feel drawn to this council. I'm wondering if this council can help, particularly those who are passing away, to get them linked with the tribe. And it sounds very self-serving and probably narcissistic here, but my auntie passed away, and my dad is very proud, and he knows who he is. He's not going to sweat it. But if he gets irritated by somebody, he's like, I don't need to talk to him. I'm not going to worry about it. I know who I am. But as I do this work in the community up here and across the state, it would be nice to see what my connection is. I've been told that I have connections to Tejon, also San Luis Obispo. So the idea of the California Indians, that is still an issue in 2020. What do we do with the lineage? What do we do with those who have California Indian roll numbers and who are descendants of those? So I'm hoping this council can maybe sort that out and advocate on behalf of a number of American Indian folks who, although have access to tribal health clinics and services, but don't have access to go to museums for NAGPRA protections, scholarships for schools. When I was at Humboldt State University, the only thing that was available, and some of you might remember if you're old enough to remember, the Maple Creek Indian Scholarship is the only one for California descendants. So there's no federal funding for a Chumash descendant. But I know who I am. I'm still going to practice, as I said. But I do want to thank all of you. I know it's been a long day for you. But if this council and the Healing Commission, I think a great way of healing is a lot of California Indians were duped back in the day. It was based on basic survival, especially for those who lived in some of the scariest parts. I know Butte County is probably running in there too, but Bakersfield, probably one of the most unfriendliest places, still is. But I just the idea of how do we take care of the descendants, California Indian descendants who are walking around with state roll numbers and even their children. How do we advocate with the tribes that are already existing? Because I am calling Tejon, I'm not getting calls back. I'm calling Tejon, and some of these families are, celebrating more quinceañeras than they are flower dances or puberty ceremonies. are not doing solstice ceremonies, are having powwows. We're not powwow people. So the advocacy is what I'm asking for this council, particularly not just for myself, but for tribal people up and down California who are California Indian descendants. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comment. We will have the council consider that as they discuss issue areas and potential work of the council tomorrow. We are at time, and I appreciate that we need more public comment, but I think that we'll dedicate the last half of the last agenda item to public comment tomorrow, just given that we've hit time. And I apologize that, we had some craziness today with the governor's press conference, but I do want to make sure that folks can get where they need to go after this, given that we have a number of tribal leaders on this Zoom. So if there are additional public comments, we encourage you to submit them in writing to the info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov, and we will make sure that the council has it before tomorrow's meeting. And also we'll have the opportunity to open up more for public comment tomorrow as well. So with that, we will adjourn for today. Thank you all council members for your time. This has been a wonderful discussion, and looking forward to more fruitful discussion and public comment tomorrow, and some good presentations where you can really dig in with the experts tomorrow morning. So thank you all and take care.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank